Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. The first show after a Seahawks regular season game for 2024, and also the first show after a Seahawks win. So I think we're all feeling pretty good about things today. I think we're all pretty happy with the way this season has gotten started, but we got to talk about it. So we're going to be dissecting this Denver Broncos game that is now in the rear view mirror a little bit. And then we're going to turn our focus to the New England Patriots coming up this weekend. So we're going to do that with me, Brendan, and we're going to do it with him, Brandon. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
It's always a little bit better after a win, but it's always great to just be talking football regardless. But fantastic, man. It's been fun watching the fan base be able to turn over this win and feeling a little bit of that excitement, maybe starting to bubble up a little bit.
That's right. So first, generally speaking, I think both of us have had a lot to say about this Broncos game already. There's been plenty of stuff to get into about it. But generally speaking, was that in line with what you wanted and what you were expecting?
Yeah, I think in general terms, it was. You have a rookie quarterback coming in, or let's say we play a backup quarterback like we will be this week. Make it hard on them. Don't make things easy. I mean, don't give them simple, easy reads. Press them a little bit. And I thought the Seahawks did a good job of doing that without actually having to blitz at a heavy rate on that side of it, that they could do like Macdonald does, the appearance of it, the changing of coverages. But then also seeing these other elements come into play. The fundamentally just seemed more sound. Obviously, the tackling took a big leap forward in my eyes across the board. And you saw it kind of all come together. So, in general terms, as a quick answer, yes, it is one game and you don't want to overreact to that. But I've also said with this, as you probably have, the fact that this is game one, we're saying about this team right now, kind of is significant, though. That this isn't week 11 where we say, oh, we saw the plan finally hit here now. All these blown coverages have been happening. All these times where it's been looking loosey-goosey and it's finally tightened up here week 11. It's not what we're saying. It's week one you're doing this. And, some revisionism going on at times and people looking at that Bronco team. Yeah, I get it. The receiver's not great. I get it that the rookie quarterback, but that's an offensive line coming in that can get it done. And you took it to him and took it to him better than in a lot of ways any team in the NFL, at least as far as pressure rates go. So just yes. And what was your thought? I was just fantastically impressed, though.
Yeah, I was really happy. It took a lot of weird and kind of fluky stuff for that game to even be remotely competitive. I think that there was a lot of stuff that you may not see again for the next few decades. When's the next time you're going to see a team take two safeties in a game?
Well, if Williams keeps letting the ball fall at the 7-yard line,
yeah,
quite a bit.
Yeah, but overall, you got to be really excited about at least one side of the ball here. And all things considered, that's probably the side of the ball that you should be thinking about more than any other, because that's the side of the ball that hasn't been good in like 8 years and hasn't been competent in 2 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when was the last time, Brendan, that we out-schemed somebody or that we confused somebody or that you had a variety of free rushers coming? And that's on the few times you were sending the blitz. I very infrequently, and it's stark difference, is it not?
Yeah. There was a tweet from, I think it was Move the Sticks, talking about how Seattle mixed up their coverages. They didn't run any one coverage scheme more than like 20% of the time, or maybe it was 25% of the time. They were throwing some cover 1, cover 3, cover 6, doing all kinds of interesting things. You saw us send the nickel corner blitz a couple times, the linebacker blitz a couple times. I think there was like one safety blitz at one point. I'm not 100% sure if I'm correct on that, but I believe there was. So there's a lot of things going on here, but I don't feel like we showed everything this week either. I feel like that at a certain point, I have a couple of Broncos people that I follow over on Twitter as well. And by the end of that game, they were kind of complaining that Seattle wasn't even really disguising it, and Bo just couldn't really do anything against it still.
Yeah, I think they definitely didn't unleash all of it. You see that especially with even the blitz rate being in like the 20s for week 1. And I think that the more the front four gets the job done up front, Brendan, and the more those guys just are able to handle business on their own, Macdonald will be perfectly happy with dropping the 7 in coverage and trusting into that, And I think that is a game we're on. He just sort of picked his moments when he was going to bring bring some heat. But yeah, I think that they also felt pretty comfortable with how they could stop that team and confident how they could stop that team by the time they got in the third quarter, where they knew there was no answers. They knew their guys on the edges could hold up against their receivers, that they didn't have anybody dynamically that was going to take the top of your defense off. Your guys could run with them on the outside. And I think freed you up to tighten down the coverages and make it, harder down there on that side of it. And Nick's, as well looked like he was in over his head as a rookie quarterback, first start.
Mm-hmm.
Not the worst look. It's not an indictment on him. This is what happens to oftentimes rookie quarterbacks and why you have to really work to protect him. I was surprised a little bit that the Broncos didn't do a little more Javonte Williams. I think that part in the game stood out to me as if they were, I don't know that they just don't think he's this back, but he still looked pretty good to me to my eyes. And I know Jalil's kind of their fast scat back type, but also did a good job stopping the run on top of everything else. So a complete defensive performance. Obviously, like you said, you're not going to see another game like this. I think the defensive performance also has to be lauded, not just for how good it was, but it's on the field for all of those snaps. How many games have we watched the last few years, Brendan, where teams our defense is on the field for 70 plus snaps, and they're going, okay, well, they're just wore out. They've got nothing, no more gas is left in the tank here at this point in the game. And that defense remained strong through all of those snaps out, even though they were on like that and put into so many perilous situations, from the fumbles to the interceptions to the safeties being returned back and giving them a short field on that side of it. It was really a high degree of difficulty day for this defense.
Yeah, they had a lot to overcome, although they also had quite a bit going in their favor, like the fact that the Broncos offense, not really a lot going on over there that you're excited about. No receivers that are really any kind of a threat. The two receivers they have that have speed are not getting in the game, with Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims for some reason can't get in the game either. I don't know what's going on there. That one's weird, but still, I mean, that offensive line is legit. That's a good NFL offensive line. Garrett Bowles is a great left tackle. Powers and Miners are both good guards. Mm-hmm. So getting that kind of pressure against that offensive line, I take a lot away from that.
Yeah, I do too, especially because it was a pressure coming from a variety of people. And it was also, if you look at it, because the blitz rate wasn't there as much really with this, it was guys working together all along that defensive line in tandem and what they were doing, because so many, it wasn't just certainly Boye Mafe pops with the 9 pressures, but all of them were generating pressures across the board. 5 quarterback hits for Leonard Williams. Byron Murphy really wasn't getting the chance because he's playing so much nose tackle and just, I don't think was having to be out there for as maybe many snaps because of the way they were, aligning. But Draymond Jones gave Garrett Bowles the toughest day that he's had at the office over the last 3 years from the left tackle position, a 20% pressure rate from Draymond Jones. And you go, boy, all of them are getting done across that line of scrimmage here throughout this game. And that's so very impressive because that's hard to accomplish and something we've been seeking kind of a little bit for years here.
Right. And I also noted one thing. I made a video about this morning. Linebackers. So really just, we're talking about Dodson and Baker, just those two guys, targeted in coverage 11 times, allowed 11 yards, which our linebackers haven't had a day like that in a very long time. If anything, that's the area that always gets exploited. So to have a game like that, and I understand that Bo Nix had very little accuracy if he went more than like 8 yards down the field. I know that some of it's on him, but to see the linebackers cover like that, because they couldn't attack the outside corners either. Witherspoon gave up very little. Woolen gave up literally nothing that whole game. Like, generally speaking, you would assume that somebody's going to give up something somewhere on this defense, but not really. The only guy who gave up anything was Trey Brown with that one play right before half. That was it. So, I mean, you're not going to see another game where they play that well, and you're probably not going to see another game this year where we play a quarterback that bad or who played that poorly, but it's still impressive to do that in the modern NFL. The modern NFL, you're not supposed to be able to be that good, holding an opposing offense to like 3 yards per drop back.
Yeah, and you have a guy in Sean Payton who's supposed to be a guy who's a competent offensive mind in this league. And as much as last year was rough for them, let's face it, in that year where supposedly they can't make Russell work. They're still out there getting 8 or 9 wins last year. They pulled off, to your point on this team. So it's not necessarily the worst roster in football or as devoid. And a guy like Courtland Sutton, for instance, he's not going to take the top off the defense, but that's a guy that even as recently as this whole kerfuffle with Brandon Ayuk, the Niners were reaching out to the Broncos about potentially trading for him. So a guy that they think that he was at least some value in that way, and the guy can get open, and you put some clamps down on him. And so I agree. I think it is a very impressive performance. It might be, as you said as well, maybe the most we end up coming to find out. We'll have to see on the quarterback thing with that, Brendan, because we might, especially after tonight, be facing even rougher in a 7th round pick variety. And I'm not talking Purdy here, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
I think it was a great opening step here by Macdonald, and again, he's just starting. You're looking through the peephole here of what he can begin to unleash, because he's not going to set the stage here and throw everything at these guys from day one. He's going to just keep building this up more. The more details they get within this defense, the more that they start to onboard, the more wrinkles, the more turns. So very impressive, very, very impressive.
Right. And offensively, I mean, it looked like it was going to be one of those days for a little bit, but that second half, really nice adjustments by Grubb. I think he finally accepted that I don't have the offensive line that I want to have, so I got to play with the offensive line that I got. And when we went to that run-heavy attack, things flowed. Things flowed. And I know some people are not going to be thrilled with the overall production, but I think when your offensive line plays that poorly, scoring 26 points is actually a little bit of a miracle. So I'm not too discouraged by anything I saw out there. It's got to get better just by default. We talk about how offensive line play is about continuity even more than it is about individual talent of the players. Give these guys some time. It will improve. And I think that they are still headed in the right direction.
Well, we've got certain trends that are still spilling over from last year in regards to pass protection, because when you look at the team that blitzed at the highest rate this last week in the NFL, Brendan, it was the Denver Broncos. And so the Denver Broncos are bringing over something from last year. And this was something that, of course, Mike Macdonald created. Really, I think, is a trend across the league when he played the Seahawks in that Baltimore game last year, where teams started to realize you could attack our pass protections. You could do it with the blitz. You could have a lot of success with that. And so this is continued over from last year. And I think there are a couple reasons why it's continued over, even though we have Grubb in here now newly on point. I think, like you said early on, there's a little bit of, I'll trust my pass pro. I won't have as many guys helping out in the backfield, and we'll hope those guys can hang in there and hold on. So there was a little bit of that at first. I think as well, you have made a bit of I think this is the part we have to be kind of acknowledging here at this point, Brendan, because there's some frustration from the fan base, but I think has to be an understandable point here too of this being purposeful. And what I mean by that, Brendan, is that when it comes to Lincoln Tomlinson and Bradford as your two guards, they are there because they're really good run blockers. And they both have issues as pass protectors for separate reasons. Bradford because he's raw and rough and needs to grow with time, and Lakin because he's old and he just sometimes ain't going to be able to move against those 3 techs. He's probably would be better suited, quite frankly, as a right guard at this point in his career. But that is what it is. So you're going to get the good and the bad with that at times. And that means there's going to be times they're going to be able to open up holes in the run game, and your backs are going to be able to be a real significant work off those holes. But then there's also going to be the times within that, then you're going to have the brutal moments in pass protection. And we're going to have to bake a little bit of that in until this team decides to tangibly go a different direction. Because I think you'd acknowledge, Brendan, if Haynes is in there versus Lakin Tomlinson right now, he's a better pass protector than Tomlinson right now. That would be probably pretty undoubted for what we saw from where Lakin is in that part of his game, right?
Yeah, I think you would pretty much have to be. I don't think you can be much worse as a pass protector than Tomlinson is right now. I mean, Tomlinson, not only is he old, but he's a terrible scheme fit for what we're probably trying to do here. So, this is where the coaching staff needs to decide what they want to do here. And if the strategy is we're going to stick with Lakin, then you have to be willing to run the ball more. But if you want to embrace your native state, which for Ryan Grubb is passing the ball, we know he wants to pass it. He's a pass first guy. Then you need to consider making the switch. And honestly, I probably would make the switch because Lakin to me is not going to get better. He's the guy who might get worse because he is so old and he's been bad for 2 years now. I don't think there's any upside there. So I would at least consider making that switch. But if you're not going to, yeah, you're going to have to play more the way we played in that second half, where we really did embrace the rushing attack, and it worked really well overall. So we'll see what approach the team decides to make. We know that Lakin's not going to get hurt, so the decision's not going to be made for us because Lakin never gets hurt. Lakin is an Iron Man. So we're going to have to make a call there. I would personally make the switch to Haynes, but the only thing I really care about is that they make a decision that jives with the game plans that we see on Sunday, ultimately.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, giving it a little more time. I mean, look, I know I'm not high on Lakin by any measure of it. I understand what they're doing with him in there, because remember with this too, is that you bring in Haynes, the other part, and this is kind of where the layers to me come into this decision, because, a bit of what you have as far as the troubles and what Denver's looking to do by blitzing at that rate last week is attack, not just simply guys that have deficiencies in pass protection, but also the fact that you have 4 new starters across that offensive line. And one thing that we know about offensive line play and good offensive line play is that it requires the cohesion and the chemistry and the time that is required for that to build up. And so day one, is that going to be there with that many guys that are all working together for the first time anew? No, it won't. It's going to look rough like we saw. And I think that that's not to be surprised. I think when it does come to Haynes, though, I do believe he's a better pass protector. I think he probably doesn't give you as a left guard what they feel they're going to be able to get from Lincoln as a run blocker. And I think that's where I come back to. I don't disagree with you on the Haynes being a guy that there's certainly maybe there's a better play, at least as far as pass protection, to a large degree there with him there. But I think that they think there's also the deficiency to that side. And I think that they're not overlooking Haynes' talent is what I'm trying to say. I think what they're doing here is making the tangible choice to put more of a dedication in that ground game and moving people off the line of scrimmage. And it may change with time with that, but I think right at the moment, that's what Grubb's leaning into. Now he has to adjust to that. And he has to adjust his protections to that. And that means, you need a little more max protect. That means some more chip blocks. That means sliding those double teams to that left guard when oftentimes you might be sliding it by often to the right guy or right over there to the right guard like you would on those typical double teams on the one tech. But I think you've got to make adjustments to it, whatever you do. And the thing with the one little more point, Brendan, we've got to start to bake in a better plans for how to deal with the blitz. I don't know if it's getting the play call in there earlier to Gino and letting him have more time to survey. I don't know if it is giving him the hot route reads that they can go to as a play call with it, but teams are now going to continue to do this. It's a wave that is washing over from the prior year, and it's going to continue to keep going until we prove we can stop it. And you saw what we did in this game, Brendan, was you had a couple points of broken coverage from this. You're able to hit a wheel route. You're able to go to the back shoulder throw to Tyler. You've got guys that can win on the outside one-on-one if you're going to blitz, because if you blitz, that's what's going to happen. You're one-on-one at that point. But we do have to find an answer to it, because I think teams are just going to keep kind of cranking this heat up, until we prove we can deal with it.
And there are definitely answers out there. This isn't an impossible thing to do. Teams do it all the time. Teams deal with the blitz all the time, and they do it successfully. So it's not like this is a hard thing to figure out. You just need to have your players execute it. And I don't know. I look at that first half, and you look at a lot of the all 22 type tape. A lot of those play designs were great. You can see the stuff going on downfield that is going to result in wide open receivers in big plays. But the pass protection just broke down before Gino could actually capitalize on any of it. So if that's just going to be the standard for the rest of the season, then I hope that Grubb understands that he's going to have to change the way he's doing things. And in that second half, he did. So I'm encouraged by that, because he could have just kept beating his head against a wall or hoping that his offensive line eventually just started playing better, but he didn't. He found a different way to move the ball.
Yeah. And I think, like you, there are ways to attack it. I think he's also, he was probably walking in not as much expecting the blitz being at this rate from the Broncos, because they weren't at this blitz rate necessarily last year. They're certainly willing to blitz a decent amount. They were last year, but not highest rated in the NFL level, not Minnesota Vikings from last season level of blitz at like almost 50% rate. So he probably wasn't walking in thinking that's what they were going to do. Certainly not when he's got 7-step drops to kick the game off, and he's got the like, whoa, okay. But it's something I think he'll start to notice now. And okay, this has been going on from last year. I got to think a little bit more along these lines, because this, not just this, it doesn't matter whether the opponent's built to blitz or not. Teams will call it up, as we saw even with the Niners last year, a team that doesn't like to blitz a lot, but when they faced us in a couple of those matchups, now again, they're like, oh, they struggle with this. We're going to dial this up a lot more in these games against Seattle than we normally would.
Right. And, the good news is I didn't think Connor Williams played all that great on Sunday, but he's going to get better. He got here 3 weeks ago. It's his first game in 9 months. So that should be kind of baked in going forward. A big improvement from the center position, which is a big part of not just blocking, but also calling out blitzes. It's the center's job in many cases to get everybody in the right place. So I think that I think that the Connor Williams improvement is baked in. I think that we should expect Bradford to be better than he was yesterday, this week, just because you can't really be worse than that. He was an unmitigated disaster until we started running the ball. So there should be some stuff that gets better, just kind of by default. So that's great.
Bradford's a project, and projects are going to take time to build. And we're getting the scaffolding in, we're getting the walls up, we're getting the flooring in. So we give him that time. The good news with him is that unlike that Lakin, you've got the upside there in that kid. Mm-hmm. And then it's just about, as you and I've talked many times with him, comes out of college, not many starts some games last year.
Right.
Let him have that chance to develop in this role. And then sometimes in some of these guys, the only way they're going to develop further is get him on that field and run through the rough parts of it to get to that point where they then develop into the player that they're going to become.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that's a pretty good 20 minutes on that Broncos game. I think we said what needed to be said. It was pretty good. A lot of dumb things happened in that first half. But honestly, it's pretty impressive they found a way to win that game, even with all those stupid things. That should encourage you, because those stupid things should not happen in a vast majority of games we played this year. So it's going to be better than that down the line. We're not going to have 2 safeties and a muffed punt and interception on the second play of the game in most games we play this year. Hopefully not any of them, honestly, but
You'd hope not. That was a brutal start. That was a brutal start. At least it wasn't the Rams last year. I will say that. That thing was horrendous.
Mm-hmm. And, that one kind of made sense, right? Because the game was going okay until Cross and Lucas both got hurt, and then we couldn't pass protect at all. Like, that kind of made sense. This was just like, everybody's in there. What's going on here? Why is George bad?
I felt like the vibes were off in that Rams game from the jump. Mm-hmm. I just felt
defensively, I agree. I agree. Like, the defense had no excuse being that bad. The offense, I kind of got it.
Yeah. It just felt like the vibes in that way were really just off. And this stuff was more just kind of, freakish and just weird stuff happening. I felt like where last year was like, you didn't, like Carol said at the end of the game, I didn't have the team ready to play. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, wait, that's the opening game of the season, and so I that was a little bit tougher for me. But this one, to me, was just freakish.
Right. All right. So 1-0. You're 1-0. You won a game you're supposed to win, but you did win it. You overcame a little bit to win it. You got it done. You okay?
Yeah, I just cleared my throat. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right. So got a couple of donos here, and they both are basically about the same thing. We've got Castra Solari. Thank you for the $2. We now have a very real chance to start 3-0. And then the Real Cheese with the $5 donation, thank you, says Tua got a concussion, so first 3 weeks are a rookie and 2 backups. Man, I hope he's okay, but damn, it seems he didn't learn from the past. So both of these super chats basically are referencing what happened about an hour ago with Tua Tagovailoa. I think that's how it goes.
I want another attempt at that, please, sir.
Tua Tagovailoa.
One more time.
Oh man, I can't do it. That's a brutal one, man.
I know. I'm not gonna run it. I just want to hear you try.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but a lot of people. There's been a lot of speculation. His career might be over because this is like what, the 8th concussion.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to allow for that to go down. And at the end of the day, I'm sure he gets to ultimately be the guy that can sign off the waiver on it or not. And for him, what's the difference between 7 and 10 concussions? Damage is probably all the same. And it is what it is. I think he's kind of made his peace with that already at some point. I will say, to what you're saying though, they're going to probably have to give it an extra amount of time for him to let this. That's the whole thing with it, right? When you have a guy get a concussion, you put him back out there and then he gets another one really quick. That's where that really is bad for the player's brain at the most. And that you want to give him that extra time if you can. So this season being done, certainly being done is by the game we're going to play him at in 2 weeks from now, Brendan. I think that this is very accurate that that's what we're going to be facing. And we saw that backup come in tonight for the Dolphins, and what they've had to do, Brendan, and we know how this goes, right? You spend your $200 million on your quarterback. You can't afford to have the $5 to $9 million backup. You can't put that on the books. You've put all of the money over to the QB. Just one of the other reasons I hate putting all that money on that quarterback position like that at times, especially when you're doing it for a guy that's not necessarily one of those quote unquote guys. And if you look nationally, Brendan, when Tua's contract came up, did you hear anybody nationally saying, don't give him the deal, don't pay him? Or did you hear to a man, you got to pay him? Well, you got to give him the deal. Well, you got to give him that contract. I mean, that's what at least I heard when you'd hear, spoken about or talked about. And one reason I don't understand it.
Most people I know don't think Tua is very good. So I heard a lot of people saying don't pay him. Maybe not in the national media. Maybe
no, fans
saying there.
Yeah, fans, certainly from a fan perspective and people that you will talk to, they will see it and go, I don't understand this. But then just what you would hear from national perspective. And I think it's just more of a symptom of what you get is the lazy approach to how people will talk about the quarterback position. If a guy comes up and he's on that team and he's played marginally well, then he gets the contract to them. And it's as simple as that. And to me, it's so much more of a complicated discussion that you should have at a much greater depth than just that, looking at sort of the surface sort of level of it, which is what I think you're doing with that. But back along to this, they're putting all the money on Tua. You can't afford a great backup. We saw with the guy who came in tonight, he was kind of holding on. You knew it the second you saw the guy with the glove on his hand. You're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
When the backup comes in with a glove on his hand, I'm like, it's a wrap.
Yeah, one thing I talk about sometimes is some of these quarterbacks that get in games these days, they really do look like a punter got into the game as the quarterback. Like they had to throw out the emergency QB.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's not really a quarterback. He's not comfortable back there, but he has to go out there and do it. It makes me think of like those rare occasions when you see the punter go out there. Yeah. So, I mean, some people have been talking a little bit about how QB play seems like it's down right now in general in the NFL. I actually even did a whole video about it earlier this week, where it just seems like the days of Brady and the Mannings and Rivers and Breeze and Roethlisberger and for a while there Luck and Wilson. There was a period of time where it just felt like there were so many money in the bank quarterbacks and you'd see like 3 or 4 400-yard games every week, and now you don't. So if the quarterback play at the top is coming down, I guess it kind of makes sense that the quarterback play at the bottom would also be coming down with it.
Yeah, I think probably. I mean, it could be the quarterback play going down, but I might counter that what I think it's happening here is that the defense has started to come forward a bit to me in recent years. And that it's as much as that they've sort of caught a little bit up to the offenses who for years had this great distance that they had outpaced the defenses by. And that carryover from last year started out even into week 1. And, they're not, it's like going back to the 80s and how offenses would throw the ball all over the football field to the point that they didn't worry about interceptions. So you had guys that would throw 20 interceptions in a season and it could still be construed as a good year for them. It wasn't a big deal. And that it was a different time, but then offenses started to realize, okay, we're going to cut down the interceptions and we're going to really fight to not have those turnovers happen, a little bit more of the short passing attack. And now offenses started an explosion point. And from there onwards, it's been them kind of outpacing the defense. But now you got the defense going, a couple of years ago, we saw Brendan with some of the cover 2 shell stuff beginning this off with, and we're going to take away the deep stuff now. These 9 route throws, these quick score strike stuff you're not going to get that anymore. And we're not going to be as easy to read, and we're going to be more varied, and we're going to be as creative defensively as you guys have been offensively. We're going to start to counter that in that way. Because I think when I look at the QBs, Brendan, I look at guys that look, these guys have been throwing, when it comes to Elways or Mannings or Brady's, these kids have been throwing much longer, doing much more passing stuff at a younger age than those guys ever did. And I don't know that they're any less necessarily hungry, though that might be a bit of it. I think they're a lot more further advanced along, really. But to me, that's why I come back to saying it's more to me the defense pushing this than it is the skill level of the quarterback. It's just the fact that they've gotten better.
No, I actually agree with that. That's actually kind of what I talked about in the video as well. I think that cover 2 shell has really killed these offenses because, back in the old days, quarterbacks, they would put up these big stat numbers because they would get like 2 plays a game where they just hit a big play. And it's like, oh, that's 140 yards right there just from those 2 plays because I was able to get hit over the top. You don't hit over the top anymore.
No.
Like even the Dolphins, who have built their offense around the fastest receivers in the NFL, they don't take that many deep shots anymore. They're all about throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and you saw it in this game where it was screaming for them to try to do something to push a little bit of the ball up the football field, but they got all scared because they had the 2 interceptions. So they stopped throwing away from it. You saw the cover 2 beaters that they would try there with Tua, because Buffalo was running a lot of the cover 2 shell stuff, and they ran that 1 out route where Tua threw it and he had to throw it like real early, threw it out away, and Tyreek Hill couldn't drag his feet in bounds, and they just didn't have an answer for how to beat that defense. And a lot of times, because it's not going to be cover 2 always the post snap, or it'll be some variant that's in a different way, where before, if you saw cover 2, it was much like if we showed cover 3 before, you were going to get cover 3. If you saw cover 2 on a defense atypically before 5, 10, 15 years ago, it was going to be cover 2 post snap. Now, as we saw with Macdonald's defense on Sunday, it can be anything post snap. And this just makes it for the offenses very, very hard. They've almost been able to get away with stuff, Brendan. You know what I mean? Like, you've been able to get away with knowing what the coverage is post snap. That's such a huge, if you think about it, that's such a monstrous advantage for the offense to have. I can walk up to a line of scrimmage and I can look at what you are and where you're aligned. And I know you're probably going to be in that post snap. And you take that away from them, and that's taking away a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it as well. And I think the response to it is just these quarterbacks have to get very patient, and some of them really seem to have a hard time doing it, because you have to have a successful play over and over and over again. It just has to keep going. You have to never lose that patience, never think, oh, I'm going to hit a big play over the top here because I'm bored. You just have to be willing to take this short play over and over and over again. And I think it's tough for a lot of these guys. I
do too, especially when they start to, in these coverages, mix them up to tighten down some of that short stuff, where it doesn't become about protecting deep necessarily, where it'll look everything like protecting deep and then become squeezing you shallow. And it's like the stack boxes peeling off to the 4-man fronts. Everything is what it looks like this way to lean you that way, and then it goes this way post snap. And then next time they'll just show it and they'll bring what they're showing. And you're left in this place where you have to guess as an offense post snap. It forces you to guess post snap. And when you're doing that to offenses, I think you're going to lower down their effectiveness, because I think that's something that over the last 20 years, especially, Brendan, they've been able to get away with. They've been able to get away with, I see a cover 2 look, it's cover 2. I see cover 3, it's going to be cover 3 or cover 1. You know, it's one between 1 and 2 coverages. I'm probably going to get post snap if I see this. First, it could be anything.
Right. But to the original point of like the super chats, which is what I think the general gist of the Tua conversation is, yeah, I do kind of agree. This team should now be starting 3-0. Although I will say, I don't really consider Brissett a backup quarterback. I think he's in there because they think he's the best quarterback right now, and they don't want Drake May to be a tackling dummy behind that really, really bad offensive line. I wouldn't consider that to be a backup situation, but I do agree that Miami game has completely changed now, because if Tua plays in that game, that is incredibly irresponsible.
I would think it would be myself as well. There'll be pressure on here from a variety of different levels. You just signed the contract. They're expecting a winning season this year. McDaniel got his extension, but what's right for we'll see how that bears out, Brendan. You know, we've been down this road with players before, and we'll see. But they also lost their guard in this game, left guard. We'll see where his health will be at in a couple of weeks from now. Their left tackle, Teron Armstead, who seems perpetually injured, was out of the lineup for a good couple of series in this game as well. So if that line is dinged up and you're looking at a backup quarterback, I think that there's definitely going to be some places to attack this Dolphin team. And as good as Tyreek Hill and his Waddle is, they are kind of two of the same a bit there in that offense. And when you're looking at Robbie Chosen out there, when you're relying on Robbie Chosen to run, it looked like an option route and make the right choice, you may be in a little bit of dark waters as an offense. I'm just saying.
Odell will come and save the Dolphins in a couple weeks, hopefully, right? Odell, Hill.
They need it. That offense needs just a competent receiver they can go to run a traditional route, go get open, and take off some of the burden there, because they are just a little bit too predictable to me right now with what they're doing in the pop gun offense and the ground game.
Mm-hmm. Eric Michelet, thank you for the $9.99. Thoughts on Grubb's masterclass in the second half on Sunday to get the offense on track? Gino and Ken and Tyler were great, but Grubb's adjustment was really noticeable to me. Oh, yeah. Offensive linemen like to run block. I think a vast majority of offensive linemen prefer to run block. Even the ones who might be a little better at pass protecting, it's easier to run block because you're moving forward. So if your offensive line is struggling, embracing the rushing attack is not a bad idea at all. And I mean, it's an adjustment that seemed pretty obvious to me at the time, but it's an adjustment that they had to make, and they made it. And without it, I don't think we win that game.
No, I don't think so either. And it was also, I think, a couple of things that you saw from Grubb in the run game that he brings that's a little bit different from our recent years run game. First, they showed, I don't know if you saw, Brendan, the heat chart for Walker in the run game here.
But I saw it on PFF.
It was all over the place. There was not, oh, you just went to this side of the field and you hammer this, or you just went up the middle. The line charts on it are all over the place, where you gave no defense a bead to attack Walker in the run game first and foremost. But then in watching the all-22 tape, the thing that stands out a lot of it is the timing of the blocks coming into play at times from where they're coming from, and the pulling of guys in space, pulling guys back across the formation. And the willingness to do that stood out quite a bit as well. But I expect this run game to continue to be a vital part of what we do. And Grubb's going to make it work because he is so diversified in his approach. To me, what stagnates running attacks is, not a good offensive line, obviously not a good running back, but, then a scheme that just doesn't have a lot of diversity to it to be able to allow defenses to press down on what you do good versus having to play it straight across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was looking at the PFF chart of like where they had success running the ball. Like, you can see that for all that Bradford really, really had a hard time pass protecting in that game, when they ran the ball behind him, things were going really well. You can see that when they were running the ball behind Cross, actually, I got to say this, because when we drafted Cross, he was known as a pass protector, not really known for his run blocking, but he had a great day blocking. PFF gave him an incredibly high grade, and you can see all the success we had when we ran off tackle over there. And Forsyth, too. I mean, Forsyth, this wasn't what I expected out of him when we drafted him, but he's become like a legitimately decent run blocker. And to offset his presence out there where he really can't pass protect well at all. I think there was one play where he didn't even get a hand on the pass rusher as he got around him. You can see these areas where this can work. So, yeah, I think Grubb did do a really good job in that second half. And even in that first half, you see all the great things that he's doing, where players are clearly going to be open for big plays, but the pass protection breaks down immediately. Like on the Geno touchdown run, the play where Geno ran for the touchdown, JSN was going to score a touchdown on that play. He had beaten Riley Moss. He was headed towards the pylon. If Geno had another half a second, I think Geno gets it to him and he's in. But the pass protection broke down, so Geno found another way. But you can see the great stuff with Grubb. We just need to improve the context a little bit so this stuff actually matters. And I think it'll get there.
Yeah. So the offensive line settling down, and it will improve. A lot of reason to believe it will improve even just bit by bit here as the weeks go forward, as long as the health can hold up. I think with that chemistry continuity aspect that will come into play a bit. But I thought, yeah, Forsyth gets banged on by the fans, and he's for what he's asked to do, he's steady enough. It'd be great to have better performance from that position. It really would. This is why they signed George Fant. But you're down to your fourth tackle on your roster. You're just at times kind of just hoping they can kind of hold the line enough. And I thought he did enough on that for what you needed him to do. So,
right. Let's see here. Long-lived King. Thank you for the $5. Fans are saying trade for an O-lineman like it's an easy fix, but first week's O-lines are severely struggling across the league. Yes, that is true. I think our offensive line in the aggregate ranked about 27th, though, so we are certainly one of the worst so far. But I don't think you can trade for an improvement on the offensive line. The offensive linemen that would be significant improvements over what we have are being held on to like grim death because they're so valuable, because offensive line play is down right now.
I mean, take a team like the Jets, for instance, and all of the investment they've put into their offensive line over the past couple of years, trying to turn it into a strength, and yet it's still a thing that they can't quite get right. And I do hear people when they say this is why the Connor Williams signing was so big, why we noted it so well at the time, is that is your big trade you kind of were able to make without having to make a trade, because these guys, as Brendan says, are not available on this market. They just will not be. It will take a team, if we're going to get an offensive lineman, Brendan, it's going to take a team that's a contending team that's going to be around week 8 or 9, that we probably have to throw some assets at to pull the guy in. And even that, What was the last trade deadline deal you can remember occurring for an offensive lineman? I few and far between.
Dwayne Brown, actually. You'd have to
there
go
we
back
go.
to Dwayne Brown.
Dwayne Brown would be the one. So I went through and I looked at the team. And then the thing I did, Brendan, is I started to look through the teams that might falter a bit this year, because that's what you have to do, is you have to look for the team. Okay, we'll be in that mode rather than trade deadline. Thought they were going to be good, aren't good, salvage it. Okay, maybe the Falcons, they've had a good offensive line. Maybe there's something that you can pilfer from that. As you get down the line, maybe they got mobile-based scheme that would fit to what Grubb's looking for. But they'd have to be a faltering team. And then, I don't know, Brendan. I did look a little bit, but it's kind of a fool's errand right now. There's just not a lot that stands out.
Yeah, and teams tend to err on the side of, I want to keep my good players, even when they're really bad, because I think teams talk themselves into, well, we can turn it around in one off season. Teams talk themselves into, we'll get it all together this off season, and we'll make the playoffs and make a run at it with these really good pieces that we have. So if Atlanta, let's say Kirk Cousins is cooked, or at the very least he's having a bad year this year, which is realistic, right? He tore his Achilles. You usually don't have a monster year right after tearing your Achilles.
Did you see that throw? Did you see the throw with him from the all-22 on a couple of those throws?
Yeah.
He couldn't plant his back foot. The surgically repaired deal was like he couldn't plant, like he goes back to plant. You could see him like kind of putting up on his, rather than feet in the ground, it was like up on a tippy toe thing.
Mm-hmm. Like, if you're Atlanta, don't you, if somebody offers you something for your offensive line, don't you just go, no, Cousins is going to be better next year. We're going to try to go for it next year.
We got Michael Penix too. I mean, we want to keep the line for Michael Penix. Yeah, I think the same thing you could say to Broncos. Yeah, go to the Broncos. Hey, how about Quinn Ewers, Broncos? No, we're not going to give it. And I think Quinn Ewers just signed an extension, so he wouldn't even be
minors, not
minors. Quinn Ewers, minors. So I think that this is where it gets hard to make that trade. Back to your original point, it's hard to pull these trades off. Teams aren't going to give them up. If they're going to give it's just really hard to pull this. So we're going to have to kind of ride, I think, with more of what we've got than looked out along the league and try to grab from somewhere else. But if it is going to happen, it's not going to happen now. It's going to happen weeks down the line when there's a team that's had their heart broken on the year and they're just trying to, they're really heading into take a real heavy rebuild, basically, Brendan.
Yeah, it is worth noting that the Seahawks did restructure DK Metcalf's contract this week, freeing up about $9.5 million in cap space. Now that could easily roll over into next year, so it's not like we have to do something with it, but it shows that they're aware that they could do something and they want to be prepared to do something. But I don't believe that we can speculate on a trade at this point in time. I think that the play, if there is any play, would be to sign somebody out of free agency. And honestly, the guys you get are not going to be better than what you have. Like, say what you will about Stone Forsythe. Stone Forsythe, I don't think is going to be radically worse than Jason Peters off the couch at 43 years old. Or David Bakhtiari, Bakhtiari, who would, by the way, isn't he a career left tackle? Has he ever played?
Yeah, right? He's not coming to go play right tackle across the country in Seattle. Like there's no way David's going to do that. Not to mention he's got a huge injury history and you don't know if he'll remain upright.
Mm-hmm. And somebody like what's the other guy's name? Oh, Glowinski. Like, is that going to be better than what you're getting out of Bradford or Tomlinson right now? I don't think so. Maybe a tiny bit better, but is it really worth like destroying the continuity you've built the last few months? I don't think so.
Not when you have Haynes already sitting on the bench if you really need to go to a change. So
yeah,
I think you just got to let it ride out and see how it comes together. And getting some acknowledgement here of if you have 4 new offensive starters on an offensive line playing for the first time together, meaning they didn't even get to all play together in a preseason. They're playing for the first time together. And I was to say, okay, close your eyes and tell me what that would look like in week 1. I think the way that played out would be probably pretty accurate to what we think. So with that, to that degree, I think what we'd also think logically going forward is that the more time they get to play together, the better that they will be playing together, and that they're not necessarily huge, wide, gaping holes, Brennan. This isn't where we're trotting out Gabe Jackson at 35 years old who can no longer move, where you're making Damian Lewis try to play left guard when that's not really his bag, or Austin Blythe, who's, a back-end NFL player in this league that you're trying to have start. That's not what you're doing here. So it's much different than where it's been in years history. I know Lakins gets a little bit of that, but I mean, even though with Lincoln, at least he has a long storied past history of starting and playing well in this league, even though recently he hasn't been playing well. So we'll see how it goes. But I think it'll be better as we go along with that time.
Right. So yeah, I don't think anybody's going to come through that door and save us. I think we got to save ourselves here.
Agreed.
Let's see here. Eric Michelet, thank you once again for the $4.99. Is anyone else excited for Jenkins and Dodson like I am? Those guys jumped off my screen on Sunday. Yeah, Jenkins, I mean, he didn't allow any yak. I think it was like 18 yards allowed in coverage. 2 of it was yak. So when he got to the ball carrier, he took care of business and wrapped up. And even when there were missed tackles, because there were some missed tackles in this game, there was another defender right there. And you can see how this defense is all about the ball. Go to the ball, get to the ball, go to the ball and make a play there. It's not like Pete's defense, which is more about like stay in your gap, where, okay, I understand the benefit of that, but it also means that if somebody misses a tackle, there's not going to be anybody else there to take care of it. So you can see how this style of defense is really beneficial in that regard.
Yeah, it's a defense that time again, well, they'll tell you feel like you got 13, 14 guys in the field, and you even feel that at moments. I mean, like take the pick that Woolen had. You know, you had 2 other guys in position there that could have made the pick on that play. But you do see it in the tackling as well. And Jenkins and Dodson were outstanding. My buddy Randall was texting me saying, "Man, did we get the equivalent at the linebacker position of Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill in these free agent signings? Is this our equivalency in what we did with bringing these guys in?" And maybe so. Maybe so, because they were all over the field. And you noted earlier, Brendan, I mean, one of the reasons you moved on and you didn't re-sign Jordan Brooks and you let Bobby go, and look at Bobby this last week, solid run game, gets dinged in Washington in pass coverage by PFF and that. And I think we're pretty accurate in the assessment of where his game is at right now. Team wanted to upgrade their coverage ability with these linebackers, especially. The good news with these guys is that they're very complete as players, but that is something they bring to the stage. Both is that ability to cover in space.
Yeah, I'm very excited about Dodson, although I'm not excited about having to try to pay him this offseason because I think he's cashing in. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, the more I look at it, Brendan, especially if the players are going to ascend in the manner that they look like they're going to ascend this year, to me, the 3 players that we could talk about with this would be, Mafe, Cross, and Woolen. That if they ascend this year on the trajectory that they appear ascending towards, I think that they're likely to be in line for the contract extension at that point. And if that happens, I thought before you probably try to re-sign both these 2 guys. I don't know if there'll be quite the money to sign either of them at that point, quite honestly.
Yeah, I'm already kind of resigning myself to the fact that we're not going to be able to re-sign them. I'm okay with that too. It's an inside linebacker. It's replaceable.
Yeah.
Knight looked really good in the preseason. I don't mind riding with him. I don't mind riding with a rookie. Honestly, I'm skeptical, and I've already talked about this a little bit on my channel. I'm skeptical about being able to afford Woolen because you have to pay Spoon in a couple years, and he's going to probably get top of the market money. He's probably getting that $25 million a year at least. So the Seahawks, even when they were at the peak of their power defensively, they never paid 2 corners top of the market money. So I'm skeptical that we can afford to pay Woolen and Witherspoon. I think that's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were also in a bit of a different conundrum at that time when you didn't pay it back then. Number one, you had Browner, who was going to get to be a little older, and you'd already paid a bunch of other guys that you had already earmarked for who you were going to pay. Be it your Earl Thomas and your Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman, and go down the list of the line of the guys that you were going to pay on that side of it. And you're not necessarily in that same point right now necessarily as we go forward. My thinking on this is that you will be able to pay all 3 of these guys, and that the team's intention will be to do so. The other part of this that I think drives this decision-making, Brendan, is that you're not rocking the Carroll defense. This is not, hey, we can go get a zone cover corner who just needs to tackle really good in the draft in the 3rd round, and we'll be fine opposite Sherman. This is having guys that could be lockdown corners on the outside is one of the most optimal things for this defense in the history of this defense. The defensive coaches have leaned towards loving these kind of players. So my belief is that one thing we got to pay attention to and key in on this with these 3 guys' contracts coming up is, as I always say, Brendan, the leverage aspect of it. Leverage dictates and decides the deal. Yes, are these guys worth this amount on the contract of the market? Yeah, if they were in the open market, but they're not on the open market. There's a final year of their deal that they're on the hook for to the team. And in Cross's case, he's got a 5th-year option. And you still have 2 franchise tag points you can theoretically hold over a team at that point. Now, I don't think it gets to that point. But what I think it does do, Brendan, is drive the negotiations to get done at a place that's going to be reasonable for both the team and the player. And they will get that sort of average per year situation, but because you have the final year of that contract, because they're not coming off something where you're eating prior bonus money, you can at that point bury the first year of the deal very low. And let's remember, I know you're not running into this, but I'm running into this from a lot of people getting hung up on the 25 cap situation. And I think too much so, Brendan, because they're not looking at the flexibility of the situation. And they're especially not looking to the 26 situation where we're top 3 in cap space right now as it currently stands. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it from that far-fledged point of it, you're not really paying anybody in the long term as it stands. So you can afford these guys. Some of it's going to be driven by how they approach the quarterback position, and there'll be some other tough decisions in there. But I think on those 3, also understanding, Brendan, when you look at the history of John Schneider, point to me of a time when you've had a player through the first 3 years of his deal perform, ball out, ascend as a player, and then he says, go ahead, bye-bye. I'm going to let you go. Who did he not pay in that era of time in that way that was in that player? And you can go to maybe a Brandon Browner, for instance, but I'd say that's an undrafted rookie free agent you brought in. That was like a guy, kind of a UFL guy. That I'm talking guys you drafted in-house who performed at that point, who were not rewarded on that deal. Who they're like, yep, we're moving you off. I can't think of many, more often than not, they come back to paying those guys.
Okung would, I guess, be the one guy, right? Okung, they never let get past his rookie deal. That would be the one example, I think.
That would, but I think that there's pretty obvious the reasoning why on that one. What do you think would be the reasoning on that? Yeah. Why they probably wouldn't?
Oh, yeah. It's because they had to pay all the guys. They had to let somebody go.
I don't think so. I don't think that's the reason.
Do you think it was his play? Do you think they didn't think he was all that?
I think it was his injury history.
No.
He was injured every single year he was here. Now, he was able to play a lot of times and go out there and grind through, but he was always fighting through some kind of injury when he was here. And I think that that's part of what factors into when you're going to give a guy a contract extension, is if you think the health's going to hold up. And even if you look at Okung leaving, he played reasonably well for the Broncos for a year there, but the injury stuff continued. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me on this if I'm out of base on this, but I believe that the injury stuff still continued to kind of pop up for him, where he was always sort of still dealing with it. And I don't think John trusted that in the long term, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but you're right. That is an example of it. So I don't want to knock the feet off the stool on that one on you. I mean, that would be the one. But I think for every one of those, there is a Cam, an Earl, a Richard, from Doug to, hell, just you can kind of go through the list. If you perform well in that rookie deal, if you really rose up and did your part in the way these guys were projecting them to do, I think that they get rewarded. And I think that you structure the contracts in a way where you can make it work.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because we're not far away from this being a real thing. Mm-hmm. So Andrew Thomas of the Giants last offseason, so a little more than a year ago, was in the same position that Cross is likely going to be in the offseason, because I'm assuming, by the way, that Cross has a really good year this year. I'm assuming that he plays at a really good level.
Let's operate like that.
If he doesn't, then we don't have to extend him at all. We just play him the 4th year and you're like, go earn it, right? If he doesn't have a good year, then who cares? But Andrew Thomas was in the same position. He was still staring down the barrel of the 4th year of his rookie deal and the 5th year option and 2 franchise tags. And he got $23.5 million from the Giants.
Yeah.
So 2 off seasons later, Cross in that position, what does he get? Does he get at 20? What are you talking here? 26?
Probably 26. But remember this one thing, back to your point on that. What was not then Trent Williams up around 28 to 30 million when he was signing that 23.5? Like, he could come, this is that leverage thing I talk about where theoretically Andrew Thomas comes back to the Giants there and he says, well, hey, I'm at that level. I'm at that level. I'm the next guy up. We see this with quarterbacks all the time. Do we not, Brendan? Where you're the next guy up. So you're going to get paid that, if Trent's at 28 to 30, then I'm a 31, but no, he got the 23.5. Yeah. Why? Because the Giants had that leverage in the deal. They had that 2 years of control over the top of him. And that's going to refine out so yeah, you're right. 25, 26. And again, it's more of a cost, but again, the cap's also higher. So from a percentage basis standpoint, is it the same to the point of the percentage of what the Giants paid to him on the cap for this year? Yeah, probably. I came out to somewhere about collectively on the first year of the cap hit for the three of them, you're at about like 30 to 35 million. You could lower it down into that area of things for those three guys on the market setting deals you're thinking about right now with Cross and applying to Woolen. If you want to apply to those three guys, and I believe that you can create that space. You've not jumped into this void year deal that you just did with DK is the first time that you've done that. Part of what I think they do with this DK deal is frankly to have the money that they're just kind of injecting into next year's cap to make sure they can get all these deals done. But that's where I think that you can make that happen. That's not you having to perform some insane cap economic Saints type stuff, Brendan. You don't have to go down to New Orleans to make this happen. I don't think it can be done. The thing to consider on this is how you have these guys and structure them up in that first year of that deal to really lower down that first year and then keep even the deal as you go through. Okay. To get into 26 and 27 where we don't have any future commitment currently, really, where there's nothing that we're really on the hook for.
Yeah. I don't doubt that it can be done. Right. I mean, look at the Niners. They've kept everybody. So it can be done. The question is, are we going to be willing to do it? And I would like to. I like these players a lot, but at the same time, this Niners team that they've kept basically everybody on, except for, I guess, what's the defensive tackle they traded to Indy? Buckner?
Yes.
Yeah, Buckner. I guess Buckner's the one guy they didn't keep.
Armstead.
Oh, yeah, Armstead as well. But they kept so many guys. They kept, especially offensively, they kept pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
That's a core that has made the NFC title game 4 times and made the Super Bowl twice. So this Seahawks team is going to have to show that they're worth having everybody be kept. And I hope that probably means you need to at least have some modicum of success this year. And I think they will. I want to be clear, especially after that first game, I'm feeling pretty good about it. But I think it's going to be a little harder to justify overextending yourself for a team that either goes one and done or doesn't make the playoffs every year. So hopefully the team is able to justify doing something like that because I would certainly support it.
I'd like to see success, but at the same point in time, if these three guys just excel where maybe some other guys aren't as much on the team, I don't want to not give them a contract extension because other parts of the team aren't holding up their end of the bargain. And I think that these guys are guys that are playing, not only are they excelling on these rookie contracts, they're playing at prime positions, edge, left tackle, shut down travel corner, who has fluidity and fluency in playing both zone and man coverage concepts. I think that these are things that are prime positions to want to keep and retain anyway, beyond just the fact that they've earned the contract, you develop the players. To me, it just speaks to the fact that this is what you want. And again, if this was a bit of the Carroll's thing with Woolen, if this was back to that defense and you're going to rock Woolen in zone like we saw last year, Brendan, right? Best man cover corner grade in football by PFF, but spend so few snaps actually in that man coverage corner place. You're not utilizing him to his utmost. So why go pay that guy all that money to put him in a position where you can just sort of slot any kind of old corner in there in that zone coverage concept, and you're not going to get a far drop off of a play, and you're saving a lot of money. But when you're going to have a guy that is going to play a lot of man, and he is going to travel with that number 1 wide receiver, and you can have the thought of pairing him and Witherspoon up in the future on this defense, and understanding this defense loves having corners that shut guys down because it can utilize that to the utmost, Brendan. That's the thing with this. It loves those corners because now it frees up me to be able to really bring a house and to stack those boxes and to trust you in space on that receiver and know you're not going to give up the big play. And it's such a huge part of what this defense wants. And I think Macdonald, coming from that history of it, is going to be hard pressed to want either of these two corners to walk if they continue on their current trajectory.
Yeah, I feel like Cross is the guy you have to keep no matter what. If he plays well this year, of course. I feel like Cross is the take care of him as soon as possible. Get him. Maybe you can even get it down to like 25 mil a year. If you can do that, get that done immediately. Slam dunk. I think Walker is the guy who clearly you can't make the extension on. He's already having injury issues. He's already missing games. He's a running back. I think that's the one that is clearly you can't do it. And it's the other two that I'm not so sure about. I could see them having to make a tough decision where one guy gets kept and the other guy doesn't. I could definitely see that. And I'm not sure how to feel about that. And I'm not sure which way I go there if that is the case. Because, I mean, don't forget, by the way, I know we talked about this in a previous show about whether or not this team is going to be willing to make a big investment on Geno Smith. And you speculated that they wouldn't, but maybe they would. Maybe they would be willing to give Geno $50 million a year if he has a good year this year. And if that's the case, that changes the formula as well.
Yeah, I think That's definitely a big part of this, I think, Brendan, if the team wants to tactically go back into that same boat, or if John goes to more of the 2012 blueprint, seeking to more find quarterbacks where he's got a pairing of Hal and a young quarterback coming in and he lets them duke it out and let the best man win. And on that, neither of us really know what his approach will be on that. And some of it could be determined, like you say, by Geno having the year he might have this year. I think when you come down to this next year, we don't have a lot of significant free agents that we've got to worry about. You have the Geno and DK deals really that are sitting at the top of the stack. The good news in on that, though, and why you didn't redo the Geno deal is that on both of those two deals, when you redo their deals, you're going to be able to lower down their cap hit on the first year of those deals versus where they are right now on the 2025 books, right? The 2025 books have them here. You'll be able to bring them down there, though they're getting their future extension money down the line. Thus, you then having more money to pay these three guys we're talking about, Brendan. I agree with you on the point of Walker. He does become the odd man out on this. Even beyond, I think, just the injury thing, I think it just becomes, it's not smart to pay running backs. I don't want to pay running backs. And I like John's process of, hey, I'll invest in second round. I'll invest in these really prime guys. But yeah, we will, after that rookie deal, look to move on, and we'll pay the other positions that are of those other prime positions like edge, like shutdown corner, like, number one wide receiver, those type of things. We'll go after that instead. But I think there's enough money to get these guys all done. And I've looked at the books pretty thoroughly on this, Brendan. I've dived into it. When you look at the Niners, for instance, on what they have none of that flexibility. They've strapped themselves in. There's no ability even at times to post June 1st guys to create cap from the Niners perspective of this. But from the Seahawks perspective, they can get it done, mainly because they can so much lower down that first year hit of these deals because they're able to do this early rather than doing what we see some teams do, Brendan, which is wait too long on guys, right? They stretch out too far, and then you feel the real full burden of that hit come into play rather than getting out ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah. Also, I think it's worth noting that with the restructure on Metcalf's contract, it is now much more likely that he gets extended next offseason because the cap hit next year is massive now. And the dead money hit if you move off of him is really big too. So I think that move is going to create urgency to get the extension done with Metcalf. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I'll put it to you that way.
If I was to be asked to put a gamble, because another thing, we don't know exactly what the reasoning is behind it, and people thinking there's a trade coming. But to your point on this, if I was to have to gamble on this deal and what I think's happening here, because it's the void money's the tell. To me, that's the void money, Brennan. They could have converted base to bonus here and then just had it to where you got half his base you're eating on the books this year, half to next, and that was the way you'd save money typically to go get yourself a trade. Instead, they put the void year monies 3 years out. And what I think they're doing is they're creating the cash point for next year that they can roll over so that when you get the DK deal done, you come to DK and he does like what he did last time. Because remember last time on the other deal, AJ Brown signed his deal at $25 million per year. DK came in at 23.5.
Right.
But what you can do on that is you give them more bonus money on the front then. So that's the way you come to that place where you lower down the overall hit on the cap. You get the bonus money to the player. Right now with DK, with you converting this, you get $11 million in his pocket, I think, or something instantaneously. Right. So I agree with you. There's more to me of the signs of this being one that is used. I think even maybe having the parameters in place with DK where you say, look, you get through this year healthy. We don't want to do it right now and set that precedent. We're going to want to sign you that deal. And then bingo, bango, he gets through the year, has a great year, and you get that deal done at that point.
Right. So it's going to be tough. I know it's doable, but the question is, do you want to do it? Are you willing to extend yourself like that? Like the Niners have done, like the Saints have done so many times, but some teams aren't willing to do it. Some teams don't. So we'll find out. I'm not against it. I just wonder if the team is going to be down with it.
I think if they know that they're in that contending state, and the thing you see with the Niners doing it, they're extending out a window that's been an elongated window, and they're trying to extend it out as far extra as they can, and they're going to pay the popper to do so. Where with us, we're just heading into that window. We're just starting to crack that sucker open, and so yeah, why not hand out these deals? You're not giving it to aging veterans who are on their last legs. You're not rewarding a guy for a one season of brilliance. You're giving guys that you've developed in-house as part of your core that rewarded deal. And it paid off for you doing it before. And I think it would pay off for you doing it again.
All right. So let's see here. Coded Dad, thank you for the $13.99 Canadian. Concerned about the Pats D. They're going to bring the house lots. Geno going to be pressured all game. Probably, but that's why the offense needs to have blitz beaters. They have to expect that, prepare for that, and be able to handle that. That's the test this week.
Interesting enough, against the Bengals last week, the blitz rate for the Patriots was actually below the Seattle Seahawks. So they were in something like the 23rd, 24th rate as a blitz rate, which is counter again to what we thought with Mayo we were going to get, and what the Patriots fans would tell you they thought they were going to get with Mayo, which is a little bit more blitzing this year. I still do believe, though, to your point, Coded Dad, that he is going to flip it up this week. Mayo comes from the Belichick background, where one game plan one week is not going to be the same game plan the next week. And when you look at the weakness of the Seahawks team going back this last year now, basically, this is the way to go after him. And so I'm expecting them to dial it up, especially out there with Stone Forsythe and him out there is a way you can attack him. I'm very worried right now about the matchup of Stone on Keion White. That's not an ideal situation. I mean, part of the problem here with Stone is he's a pure left tackle, really. He's playing the swing tackle role, but he's really best to be out there against more of your kind of twitchy edges that he can kind of somewhat stay with. It's these power edges that make him look silly on the right side. And that's what you're going to get a little bit with the Keion White, Brennan, the inside outside guy. And it's just like those heavy hands get up into Stone and he's just kind of, it can be a wrap. So you're going to have to give him some help, but I agree to Kodad's point. They're going to dial it up this game and they're going to test us in this way. You look at that Bronco blitz rate and they didn't just like go, it's like he didn't go like this, Brennan. He did this move, when you up the up the volume, you was like you slam that sucker to the top. Let's go.
Right. You just have to be willing to prepare for it. And some people noted that it seems like Walker's pass protection is starting to improve. He had a nice blitz pickup on the Geno touchdown run, actually. So if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. Now, by the way, not super optimistic about Walker playing in this game right now. He did not practice again today. Also, probably not looking at George Fant. So Forsythe will have to get it done on that front. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Nwosu we already knows out, but that was expected going back a couple weeks now. So I'm looking at, so to talk about this Patriots game a little bit, which is the point of the stream. Yeah, but thinking about that Patriots defense, they're missing a lot. Like they've got a lot going on there that's wrong. They don't have Barmore. He might not play this year, which is a big loss. He might have been their best player. They don't have Marte Mapu, I believe his name is, and he was probably going to be a starter for them this year. They're missing some other pieces on that defensive line. They've actually got quite a few injuries going on that defense. So there should be some stuff that you can take advantage of. Let me try to get a full list here because I had the full list earlier. And I've forgotten some of the names there because I don't watch a lot of Patriots games. But that is a defense that is really behind the eight ball in terms of their talent. They've got Christian Gonzalez and not necessarily a lot else.
Well, I think they've got some pretty good players. I like some of the guys they have on defense. You're right about the injury situation. Joshua Untz, Deatrice Weiss, Anthony Jennings, Jabril Peppers, Kyle Duggar, they're all in a questionable state now.
Armin Watts is on IR. Sione Taki's on IR.
Yeah. So they're beat up a little bit, but I would say that I mentioned, I think Keion White's on the rise. That's a guy that we scouted heavily coming out of the draft and a guy that was at Georgia Tech. Their coaches said, is a guy we played on the outside at like that sub 300 pounds. We've seen a lot of these guys, Brendan. They're 300 pounds and they got them playing off the edge. It's like it kind of works in college, but that's an inside guy at the next level. And you didn't get to see how productive he can be as a kind of an inside-outside guy. And they use him in that way fluidly. But Jawan Bentley is a good, solid linebacker for them. Tavi, another linebacker for them, can run around. Now, Unch he was out last week, I think he played like 15 snaps, but he's got a problem. He's working through, he's got one of those things where he might play, but he's not going to be at his full effectiveness. But in Peppers and Duggar, they do have a couple of good safeties out there. And when you pair that with Gonzalez on the back end, Jonathan Jones, even a guy that's a little bit like kind of Tyler Lockett for them in the secondary, where he's played like 9 years for this team, but he's actually had a solid year last year, had a solid opening game in week 1 against that Cincinnati team. And so, you in a lot of ways, Brendan, or maybe kind of like Denver last week, you're looking to attack their third cornerback between those three guys. But I don't know. I looked at it and thought they are beat up, but there is some talent on this defense.
Yeah, they've got some things going for themselves, but they're definitely not where they want to be right now. Is Barmore their best player on defense, you think? Do you think that's fair?
I mean, it depends on if we're talking about last year or where they're at right now this year. I mean, Gonzalez will be their best player probably this year, but he was injured last year, of course. And then, last year, I mean, I might even go with a guy like a Duggar guy or whatever over. He's really good for them. Don't get me wrong. It's a huge loss for them, and he's got blood clots. He might not ever play again. But
right.
I would probably go to a couple of those other guys even over him.
Yeah, and that being said, thinking about this game, you think about that Denver game, and you want to run the ball a lot in this game, right? Because it doesn't seem like the line's ready to pass protect the way they need to, but you're not going to have your top running back. You do wonder if Charbonnet, McIntosh, and I guess Helani are up to the challenge of really carrying the load for the Seahawks for a game. Do you think that it can be done without your top running back?
It's going to be a challenge right now with the way things are going on the offensive line, because something that still stands out that's an unfortunate trend that we saw from last season when it came to the running game is that we had a good running game in this game, Brendan. We had a lot of early penetration in the backfield against the running backs. And I think that Charbonnet is a good back, but I think he strikes me more as I watch him as a back that needs the blocking up front to be there for him. He needs you to give him a little bit of space. It's not that he can't break a tackle or get away, and it's just that he's not like Walker where, he's going to break that tackle where you think he's dead to rights. It's not going to happen. He's going to be dead to rights. And so the offensive line seems to be right now, even in a run blocking play where you might have four guys doing their job right, and the 1/5 guy is going to blow it and allow that early penetration. That back's got to get it done to get up to the spot where the hole has been created with the other four guys. And with these guys, I'm not sure if it's going to be at that spot. But you got to try, and you got to stay committed to this, because that was the best thing you did last week. And you've got to help this offensive line as much as you can by not being one-dimensional. And making the defense have to play it legitimate. So, it may be a bit of a grind game in that way. When I look at the keys in this game from an offensive perspective, Brendan, I think it's one where, unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit like last week to a degree you're going a little conservative to me in the approach. You really want to put at the head of this, Brendan, with as good as the defense is playing, to protect the ball a little bit. So maybe not be as aggressive with that, unfortunately. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge when, you're going to get those blitz looks at times, and you're going to want to attack those one-on-one matchups deep down the field. And I'm not against that, but I think that it's very important in this game, and looking at last week and seeing if this defense gives you another performance this week against the Jacoby Brissett. And we'll get to that side of the ball in a second, Brendan. But I think you got to look at this a little bit through this offensive lens walking into this, which is if they are able and capable of putting that defensive performance up once again this next week against this, let's call it stifled New England offense, or a little bit under talented offense, I think you got to walk into that making sure you're protecting the ball and not getting wild with it. Maybe not as much of the 7-step drops here and stuff, staying that committed to the run like you just talked about.
Yeah. I think that's probably the way you win this game. I think you go to the short passing attack, and I hope that we have the ability to do that, and I hope we have the ability to make it work. I mean, I do like Charbonnet, but I've said this before, I'll say it again. I feel like his best skill is as a third down back. I feel like his receiving skills and his pass blocking skills are the best thing about him. So I don't really look at him as somebody who I want to give 25 carries in a game. I know it worked well for him in college in that Chip Kelly offense, but in the NFL, I look at him a little bit differently than a lot of people, I think. So I don't know if we're going to have that workhorse back in this game. So I think we're going to have to open it up a little bit with Geno, but we're going to have to open it up in the right way as long as this offensive line continues to play the way that it does.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, look at last week and you see how Walker's running, Brennan, versus Charbonnet dealing with the same run blocking lineup in front of him. And it's pretty wide difference of production and what each was bringing. I don't think Charbonnet had a lot of holes to run through, but that's kind of just to the point of it. It's like, the line's not necessarily always going to give you those holes on this stuff. So there's times you got to make it happen. This is, to your point, then go back to, work the different backs in there, or at least work the two backs in there between McIntosh and Charbonnet, because they do have a bit of a different skill set in what they bring. And so just, at least keeping the Patriots out from locking in. How about this as well? Let's commit to doing like 4 fly sweeps to Laviska Shenault this week. No Walker. You want to attack maybe some of the edges of this defense. I think this Patriot team rallies to the ball really well. They're very well coached in that way. They can be a little bit over aggressive at times. So misdirection back to the fly sweep, have them flow one way, come back to the fly sweep the other way. commit to running it 4 times. We didn't really go to Laviska this last game. This would be a game that I would look to try to manufacture those touches into Laviska on this one, especially on those blitz points where, you've got him. And I know with Laviska it comes out, it's a big tell that you're going to run and this is why maybe you got to give him some more snaps this week if that's the case, just in the name of knowing we're going to get him 7 or 8 touches in this game, because we got to manufacture a little bit of stuff offensively here until we can find our footing on this line. You got to anticipate that a little bit here. You can't just go, it's a 1 week issue. You got to go, look, no, this is a carryover from last year. We're getting by. We have injured guys. Like, we got young guys trying to find their footing. Let's anticipate this problem in advance. Let's not react to it and going, oh, our offensive line isn't, holding. So this is a way I think you can do that, Brendan, but it takes obviously a purposeful approach in doing so.
Yeah, that's what frustrated me about that Denver game. It did kind of feel like that was the approach. It felt like Grubb was really surprised that his offensive line had those problems. And I understand they looked so bad. You never really think your offensive line is going to be that bad. I get that. But it seemed like there was some expectation that he had, the offensive line that he had at Washington that won awards for being the best in the country.
To your point, there's a couple things from this. Number one, we've seen Geno a little tight to start games. Love Geno. That opening series with Geno, let's get him rolling in space, quick little pop throw on a flat route to the tight end or something. Get him a couple easy throws. Let's not start him out with 7-step drops where you're going to wing it down the field. I know he's capable of doing it, but he can sometimes in some of these games. Remember that he's had a couple games. I feel like he's thrown a couple of these balls where you're like, whew. But yeah, it did seem like he had a lot more trust that the pass protection was going to hope up. I mean, he probably wasn't really fearful of Nick Bonito and Rochelle, whatever the guy's name is on the other side. So, he probably was,
Cooper.
Jonathan Cooper. So, he probably wasn't too freaked out and thinking they could hold up, but you're going to take some more certain steps. I also thought the thing with Washington is that you had those times that they did do the 7-step drops and Penix would let those long developing routes get down the field, but there was a lot in between there that I thought was missing sometimes from the Broncos game of those short passes and just getting the ball out of the quarterback's hand to a guy, letting him go work, where it was a little bit more of Geno having to be kind of on with it. The scramble plays, dropping back, having to go through a variety of reads before he scrambles, the Tyler Lockett back shoulder throws or, long developing routes where he's having to read to make what could be a side adjustment throw there in both cases. None of that stuff's really necessarily in there as, okay, here, let me get you something easily scripted up, Geno. Let me get you into rhythm. Let me get you in on time. And I'd like to see that a little bit more on the road here this week as well, Brendan. Like, this comes back to being a little conservative to start things out, where we don't feel like I'm all good with trying to score from the jump and do all that. But let's also understand that our defense should be able to hold up pretty good against this offense. And so it's not a requirement of us putting 30 on the board today.
Yeah. And, first week, no trick plays, really. No trick play. Do you think we might see one this week?
My feeling on this is that there was no trick plays because of the fact your pass protection wasn't holding up. Trick plays tend to be long developing. Even a flea flicker is a long developing play. And so if your pass protection is not giving you any time to do it, you can't have any confidence in to call it. So yes, I do think we're going to see it sooner than later. Some of it is that it's week 1 and what Grubb wants to do is build the tendencies that he then works off of the trick plays on. That's the beauty of what he does. So he's putting that stuff on film of here's how we do it. And then he'll throw off of it. But you've got to have the pass protection hold up on most of the trick plays to make it work.
Mm-hmm. So, I feel like you could do like a double reverse still, maybe, and that wouldn't depend so much on the blocking. It's hard.
Misdirection. That's to your point. That's misdirection. So because this team, it's like a team that knows they're not necessarily super hyper athletic and fast, Brendan. So they're all going to extra flow as hard as they can to the ball when you watch them on tape a little bit. And it's great. They've got them all committed and working their ass off to get the ball, but you can take advantage of that now because that's a team that if they start to flow this way, you hit them back with the misdirection. They don't have the speed to get back to the misdirection point. And that's why you want to lean on attacking against this kind of personnel.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Quality over quantity. Thank you for the $1.99. My 2 favorite Seahawks YouTubers. Thanks for consistency. Thank you. Quality over quantity.
Appreciate that, especially with the username.
Absolutely. Thank you. Haven't seen that one before. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
All right. So we basically talked through the Patriots defense versus the Seahawks offense. I'm a little bit concerned with no Walker, probably no Walker, and still no Fant. I'm a little bit concerned with the way it could go, but ultimately I think they find a way to get it done. They've got enough playmakers on that offense, and they showed a willingness to adapt to the personnel they have in that second half of the Denver game. So I think at the end of the day, it'll be okay. The side of the ball that needs to be a lot better than okay in this game would be
one other note. Don't let Keion White beat you in this game. Josh Owens, who's their really other real good, competent pass rusher, is obviously not 100%. Matt Judon was traded to the Falcons prior to the season. Sorry to interrupt you on that, but I just think this is the real key point I want to make sure we hammer with is let's not leave Stone out there singled up, because they're going to target Stone. They're not going to set Keion White over there on Cross's side. Another thing you can anticipate walking this game from a Grubb standpoint is that Keion White's going to be lined up right over the top of Stone probably a lot of this day. Get him the chip blocks, get him some help, have it built into the game plan.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. I mean, it's the same kind of thing that we said how many times in the Pete Carroll era. Don't let Aaron Donald beat you. Don't let this guy beat you. Don't let DeForest Buckner beat you. And most of the time, they kind of did. So this time, do things a little bit differently. And
get JSN into the role here too, because he should be a guy with some good matchups in this game with Jonathan Jones on the outside, Gonzalez following DK. JSN should have some openings.
I agree with that. So flipping things over to the other side, Seahawks defense versus the Patriots offense. This is the side of the ball that needs to be the main motor behind the win, I think, because they're getting another fairly favorable matchup in the Patriots offense that really didn't do much against the Bengals. I think Jacoby Brissett threw for like 120 yards. They ran the ball well. They got it done. But this is an offense that you should be able to excel against, kind of the same way you did against the Broncos.
Yeah, I might even offer you've got even more stuff to attack than you did with the Broncos, because you have a team that doesn't have much on the outside to challenge you. Jalen Polk is definitely, I think, going to be a good player for them, but it's still a bit of a question mark out there if they've got a lot to challenge you. And then from a pass protection standpoint, I think Denver's a probably night and day different unit as far as in pass protection than this New England unit. You got Layden Robinson out there starting for your right guard, who's questionable, by the way, with an injury. They've got a bit of a revolving door bit there with left tackle between two guys and who's going to play and who's not going to play. Cole Strange is out, that kid that they drafted a couple of years ago. I don't know what's going on with him. You look at that line and it's very susceptible. And even last week, you saw so much of their offense. Brendan was not trying to push the ball down the field, was not trying to do those 7-step drops we were just talking about with our Seahawks offense. And yet Brissett was just getting hammered a lot. I watched the game and he was getting, he was getting beat up a good amount. Now I will say too, Brendan, the Bengal offensive line, that Bengal defensive front four, because they're a front four, they're really kind of just interested in rushing the passer. You know what I mean? Like they especially Hendrickson at this point with the 17 sacks last year, like he's doing that. I'm going to run around the edge thing. And I'm just, kind of will work for them, but it's also like, they're not as sound defensively in the way they ran that, but they were still hitting him a bunch and causing a lot of mayhem to him. But, I think it all starts here defensively for us, Brendan, or not defensively, offensively here, defensively going after them is stopping the run. Get this into Jacoby's hands. Make him beat you. Make you come out of this game going, man, Jacoby Brissett beat us. And I think you go, well, if he throws some dimes across the field and pulls it, you go, okay, hey, who could see that coming? But don't let them have Ramondre just go nutty on you.
Yeah, I think Ramondre had like 100 yards after contact against the Bengals or something. He had a really nice day. Yeah. So that is definitely the concern here. And they've got Antonio Gibson as well. He's a pretty good running back. Had a nice little career in Washington before he made his way to New England. So, yeah, I am definitely thinking about that rushing attack in New England. By the way, no Kendrick Bourne either. And say what you will, make whatever jokes you want. He would probably be one of the best receivers on this team if he was healthy.
Yeah, he's functional for them. And that's where you can right now, when you talk about your corners on the outside, how you stop the running game. One thing we did last week, I'd love to see, Brendan, it just warms my heart to see, because something you and I've talked about is maybe an adjustment our defense could make over the last couple of years with Carroll when we transitioned to the 4-man fronts is what if we brought back down some of the Sam linebacker stuff? What if we brought back down the 5-man front stuff a little bit? And what do you have Seattle do last week is they rock out the pure 3-4 stuff at a high round of the snaps. And what is the 3-4? It's giving you a 5-man front on the defensive line. It gives you a natural built-in advantage a bit by the number of personnel you have on the defensive line to stop the run, to deal with the run in all the ways the runs wants to. You want to go to the edges on us? We've got 5 wide split. We can squish down on this as well. And so I love that going up against these teams that are like passingly challenged. And this is that making it hard on thing, because that 3, now you just keep that 3-4 defense on the field for a long period of time, and you're going to just squish up that running game. You're going to force Brissett to have to throw, and now you got him. Whereas the Bengals last week, for instance, Brendan, on the other side of this, all they're running is that 4-man front. So we can keep running you. We can keep running you, and we can hit our duo blocks and stuff, and we can spread you out and stuff, especially when we catch you guys like Hendrickson just wanting to rush the passer and not play the run. And bam, we got you in the running game. So I think that's a place that we have a little bit of a better way to stop them than Cincinnati did. But that's where it begins. You've got to not let them off the hook easy in this game by letting Ramondre run, because he's really their only real, I don't know how to term it, Brendan, sub difference maker, quasi difference maker.
Yeah, like a real genuine playmaker of any kind, I feel like, on that offense.
Yeah.
Like, who is their number 1 receiver right now? It's not Polk yet, is it?
I think it's got to be Polk when I looked at it.
Really? Man, that's rough. That's rough. And I like Polk. Not saying anything bad about Polk, but
no, he's good.
He'll get there.
He'll get there. He's just really young. I like their approach with what they did in getting him and Javon Baker to pair with May long term, because you're going to be able to build that chemistry with all those guys. But you caught him young right now. The place where really I think the danger comes in is the tight ends. So let's unpack this a little bit. We have in Alex Van Pelt the background coming from the Browns, and they have Hunter Henry out there with Austin Hooper as your 2 tight ends. So you will run your 3-4 sets. The Patriots will counter this with a lot of 12 personnel and with the 2 tight ends out there. So how you defend, that's going to be a big part of this as well. Those are 2 guys as tight ends that are both in Hooper. He's not as much of the run blocker, but he can still pass catch. And Hunter, you get more of a complete inline guy who can do a bit of it all. But that's also how they're going to come at you a bit, is they'll go big and heavy. You got to counter back big and heavy, which we've got. We've got those personnel packages. They call it the Durango package, I guess, Brendan. That's the name. It's like the inverse cheetah. It's the inverse NASCAR. And so I'm hyped to see how they're going to combat that a little bit, but that also makes it tough because it's a lot of that play action with Jacoby, and then come out there to the 5-yard flat route to the tight end, or the stop route to the tight end that's where they're going to try to, they know what they are. Watching them last week, Brendan, this Patriot offense with Brissett, they know they can't really try to do much pushing down the ball. So it's going to be a lot of them just trying to really, much like Denver did last week. It's kind of good preparation. It's going to be a lot of just trying to dink and dunk you.
Yeah, and by the way, I really don't think they're going to have Sidney Sowell in this game, who is their starting left guard. And I think Jake Andrews is out for the whole year, so they're not going to have him. And left tackle, Vidarian Lowe might be back, might not be back. Like, that offensive line, that is a dollar store offensive line right now. That is, so whatever they do, you should be able to just kind of take it out with that front, because you look at the way Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams played in that first game. They were just constantly in control, even against a much better offensive line than what New England has to throw at you right now. That is, and by the way, good for them for not putting May out there to get killed behind it. They actually have let Brissett be the tackling dummy. Yeah,
it's one of the few teams we've seen in recent memory actually taking a smart approach to the situation rather than just tossing them in the deep end and hoping they can swim. Excuse me. No but I love their approach with May on this. I love the approach with getting the 2 receivers like they did to work with them in time. They've got the Elliott Wolf kid there who's got the Packer background at the GM level there with the Patriots. So he's applying a bit of that Patriot model, which we know with the Patriot, you and I have been sometimes frustrated by it when the Packers were good, where it's like, go get yourself another receiver here. But they like to do that thing where they get the 2nd or 3rd round receiver, or they get a collection of them, and then they just develop them. I mean, the Packers are still doing it now with your Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs. I know Christian Watkins is technically a late 1st round pick, I guess, but he's kind of a sub 2nd round pick where they took him, where he was in the draft. So you just, that's kind of their model, and Wolf's fitting to it. And I think it's worked. I think it will work for them long term, but it's a long term approach and not a short term one, which is good for our Seahawks this upcoming week.
Right. But yeah, with that offensive line, you should be, I mean, they showed the stats this week. The Seahawks had the highest pressure rate of any team in the league, and the Patriots had the highest pressure rate allowed of any team in the league. So football's game of matchups. So that should be kind of game over right there. There's no way New England should be able to win the game given those two facts. Bottom line.
You certainly think not. And that's where you have a great advantage, because again, you did it last week, Brendan. You didn't do it on the back of blitzing either. You were in the 20s on your blitz rate as far as all the teams across the league. So you got the pressure with the front four. I think that allows you also to come into this game, Brendan, believing that we can maybe run the stacked fronts, right? But we also know we can probably, when it's all said and done, still just trust the front four to get that pressure, which means we squeeze down those routes on the back end. We bring up the coverage to tighten down on Brissett because we know he's going to dink and dunk. So then you force him to beat you down the field, pushing the ball down the field. You force their skill position players on the outside that are maybe not as dynamic and can't beat your guys one-on-one. You can trust a Tariq Woolen against a Jalen Polk or Devin Witherspoon against whoever they're going to throw him out there against. And he's got that matchup. I don't care if it's 50 yards down the field. He'll be tight. And then you let it rip. You're not having to blitz. You squeeze down the routes and you make things tough on them. I think you stop the run, and then in coverage, that's what you do on the back end of it. And I think you're going to have success with that.
Yeah. I just don't see how that matchup doesn't work out really well for us. I just don't. I mean, the front line alone should be able to just live in that backfield against. I think that by the end of the year, we might be saying that New England's offensive line is the worst in the league. There's nothing there because remember, Jake Andrews is supposedly out for the whole year. He's not coming back. Yeah.
And they're missing, as we said, they're missing Cole Strange, who was another guy that was supposed to be a bit of a pillar there. The thing with it too is that it's a situation of it's been a bit of a leaking offensive line from a talent position standpoint, where it used to be kind of a strength of the team. That's been kind of leaking out. Trent Brown's moved on to Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. They don't have the pillars that they once had in there. They've not been able to re-inject the talent in there with these guys like a Cole Strange that they took wildly. I think it was in the first round that they took him.
They did.
And so this isn't just merely that they're bad because they're bad. They're bad because they haven't been able to find the right talent. Then the guys that they're rolling with as starters are injured. And then even guys they have in that they've kind of drafted as supplemental, like a Layden Robinson. I don't know if the plan was to have 4th round right guard Layden Robinson to start year one. I don't think that was what they were seeking in advance on this. And so they're scrambling where even these backups are beat up and hurt and not 100% or not going to be able to play. They're getting deep into the depth chart. So this is why it's so bad. This is why it's in that game. I mean, that guy, he's getting hit as Brissett, and it's on 3-step drops. He's not back there sitting there just patty kicking. This ain't Brissett back there trying to improvise. This is him. He's throwing the ball out of his hands as quick as he can get it, and he's still getting hit. He's still almost at one point, I think, got injured. He came up at one point and struggling off the field. So
yeah, he actually did get banged up in the last preseason game and this game. So kind of feels like, his time is coming. How is he not going to get hurt? He's an older guy playing behind this paper mache offensive line. It feels like it's kind of like Stafford this year, right? You just feel like Stafford's not going to make it through this season because that offensive line in the state that it's in right now, plus his age and all the injuries he's already had, like it feels inevitable.
I mean, to your point, Stafford was injured in this last game for a second, right? So, it's going to be a hard thing to see Stafford getting through the injuries they're having. It's the NFL. It's hard enough to find, as we found. We're facing this right now. Just to find the starters alone is hard. To have depth that you can rely upon 3 deep to positions is impossible. Or have 3 positions go down that you're going to the backups and hope to have still solid play is impossible. And so it's not any surprise they're in this predicament, but this is the one they're in. And Jacoby only had to throw the ball 24 times last week. I don't think we're going to allow him to do that this week. I don't think we're going to let the Patriots have 40 rushing attempts. And that's to me, that's the Bengals letting them off the hook there defensively in that game. When I look at that, and that's where I don't think that Macdonald will, from a tactical standpoint, allow that same kind of thing to happen.
Yeah, hard for me to believe that's going to happen again. For us to lose this game, I think it would have to be very similar to that Denver game with all the stupid stuff that it would have to happen in the first half or so for them to be able to build that lead to where they can just run the ball the whole second half. I think that's what it would take. And it would be very irresponsible of us to allow that to happen.
That's where we get back to that conservative approach to me in the game play calling, especially from an offense and even a defense perspective, where I'd run man on the outside because I don't think they can beat our man guys on the outside, but I would probably run zone to the inside. I'd run 7-man more often than not, dropping into coverage. I trust the front 4, but offensively then as well, play it conservatively there too, because it's a game that could be as much about you not making a mistake as it is about you pounding the scoreboard and turning it into a 4th of July session in that way. I think when I look at this game, it's that way. It's okay to grind this one out, because if you don't make the mistakes, you probably win the game. You can just kind of lean on them, right? It's like jiu-jitsu, Brendan, when you get a grappler and the guy's like way better as a grappler, the other guy can stand there and he can maybe pound, but you get him on the ground and you just kind of maul him and lean on him. And, one point or another, you're going to get him into a Kimura or a triangle, and you'll get him, choked out, and it's game over. So you just have to, roll around with him a little bit there on the mat. And I think we pull it out in that way.
Right. So that's most of what I think we can say about this game, talking about our offense, talking about their defense, and the other way around. Anything else on your mind in this game? The 10 a.m. start's interesting, I guess. We haven't seen a 10 a.m. start with Macdonald yet.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot about Macdonald and how he approaches this, because I think there's some things that you can see versus where we've been in the previous history, where, a guy like Jacoby Brissett coming into, CenturyLink or whatever, playing, or Lumen or whatever. And, you'd go, oh man, might be able to get after our defense a little bit. I think we did beat him against the Colts a couple of years ago when he started for the Colts. I want to say Russell was able to beat him, but that was kind of a close game. And that was at home.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was 2017. It turned into a blowout. It was close for a little bit.
But turned into a blowout. But you walk in the game, where they can hurt you, where they can't hurt you. You cinch up those things where they can potentially hit you at. You reinforce that a little bit, dealing with the blitz, making sure your right side doesn't get have you sink the game, have your pass protection get sunk by what they're able to do in attacking you over there from that side, and then making Jacoby Brissett be the guy to get after you and beat you. Can he beat you when he's going to be under that pressure on a fairly consistent basis? I don't think so. And he's a guy that, when he steps in and he puts his feet in the dirt and he lets it rip, he can throw a reasonably good ball. Yeah. You get him moving at all. You get him starting to drift anything at all, accuracy, velocity dips right down. And that's what we saw from Nix, by the way. I thought that was kind of notable from Nix as well, is that when everything's clean and good and he gets in the pocket and let it rip, it's fine. But when you have him start to feel a little bit of pressure and he starts to, that interception to Julian Love, he starts to kind of fade a little bit, and those mechanics go out the door, and he loses that accuracy, loses that velocity. The ball drifts on him a little bit, and now you got yourself an interception. So it's
I guess a lot of quarterbacks right now in the league are kind of like that. They need to be in that Jared Goff spot where they're completely unperturbed in the pocket and can just do their thing.
Well, this is that thing we get back to as well. The NFL's recent obsession with the smaller quarterbacks and why I don't like it. I don't know if you saw this tonight with Tua at times, but did you see the bomb that he attempted to Tyreek? Yeah. It was like overthrown by 10 yards. And can you not feel in him when, is he getting it 50 yards down the field in that moment? Yeah, he's technically getting it 50 yards down the field, but you can feel when he's having to throw it, it's taking him loading and uncorking it from the full bottom of his body up to the top to get that ball, just to get it out there. And he's not putting it accurately out there. He's just trying to get it just down the field. And those smaller guys, Bryce Young to me is like this, where you can feel when they have to amp up and really throw it, unlike guys that are 6'4", that can sometimes effortlessly just let it rip. They've got to just, and it's not even, I'm not talking about like a long windup, Brendan. I'm not saying like it's a elongated wind. I'm just saying it's just, you can feel this. And tell me, do you feel the same thing from him when you see these smaller quarterbacks at times? I'm talking sub 6 foot tall kind of guys, where they just don't have as much of that effortlessness in it. And that just means that when they're off platform, back to your point, when they're off platform, they're not able to torque up as much because they don't get all the cleats in the ground. Unlike a guy like, Gino, even on the throw, let's say to DK this in preseason, on that touchdown throw at the last preseason game, you go back and watch that throw. He's off the back foot. He's just using the torque of his core there to just kind of rip that ball out. Yet he's putting it 40 yards down the field on the spot on time with some velocity. It's got a lot of touch too. It's a layered throw, but that's where I think some of these guys are a little bit undersized, or maybe there's some arm strength limitations with being undersized. That's the part that doesn't get put into the evaluation point when they start telling you that he's Patrick Mahomes minus 3 inches.
Yeah, I guess the one guy who had the big arm who was small was Wilson. I mean, because that guy had one of the best arms in the league for the deep ball for a while there. But other than that, I think you're right. Baker, not a great deep ball, not a great arm. Kyler, yeah. I think for the most part, that's I would say that's probably true. And Bo Nix, how big is he? Is he like 6 foot? What is he? 6'3", you think?
6'2", 6'3", is like 6'2.5", I think, or something in that neighborhood with it. But he struck me as that with Oregon, and that was the big thing with Oregon is everything's one read and get the ball out, right? So it's a lot of that. I get to be right on time, and the pocket's going to be clean for me, and I can step up on that throw and I can let it rip. And that's not going to be how it is at the NFL level, where a lot of times you're going to be forced off your spot. Nix will be better with time. I think I still like Nix in his upside, overall. He's not as bad as some of the more egregious examples like you just brought up. I mean, Baker, I think he can be a good quarterback, but I do agree with that. If you look at Baker trying to get the ball down the field, he needs to get the feet set and get everything kind of right to be able to get it there and get it on time accurately and like that. Kyler Murray, it still remains a problem with Kyler Murray. It was last week in Buffalo, the deep ball and his accuracy deep. He may have some arm strength to get it there, but getting there with accuracy. And that's the thing with 202 is it's not just about getting it there. It's getting there on time where it doesn't have to float up in the air like a blimp. And then also to be able to get it there in the right actual spot down the field, which is where they will struggle in at times. And this is why, Brendan, the reason I want to bring this up is you and I are going to be looking at some of these undersized quarterbacks again. And I want you in this camp with me, man. We could not be signing up for these small mighty mites and hoping that they're going to get the job done. I'd love that they've emerged and that there's more of an opening than ever for them. But and we're gonna have to this talk with certain guys too, like Cam Ward. And I mean, and Cam's great. He might be a guy to be able to pull that off. I really like him, but this is starting to just kind of grow with time because I think you mentioned Russell Wilson. He created the belief that those guys that came after him that you just mentioned could keep that on, that they could do the same thing he did with that, being undersized, but still the arm strength, throw off platform, but still throw with some accuracy when you're moving. And I just think that just shows he was more of the anomaly as that type of player.
Yeah. Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, did you see some of those things he uncorked in that game? Did you see like the fadeaway 45-yarder?
Yeah. It's 70. He got, I think they said he had 70 yards in the air on that thing.
I believe it. I believe it.
And that's falling backwards 70 yards. I think stepping on your front foot. And why I think you and I both loved him coming out. Why we would have been pulled, I think, perfectly healthy.
I don't think he'll ever make it through a full. I mean, I liked him a lot. I just don't think he'll ever make it through a full season. I think Steichen's going to get him murdered this year. I got a bad feeling. I'm not enthusiastic.
The first year and didn't get him, to your point, very far through that first year. So that's that'll be the part that remains to be seen, I suppose, on that angle of it. But he's a very talented kid, and he's got an arm. Everyone's trying to a lot of people try to make the comparison back to Cam Newton with him. I always thought that was underselling his arm talent, his ability outside of it, which is just a whole different other level.
Cam has the ugliest throwing motion ever. I can't stand looking at it. Like that's not the case here.
He never worked on it. His motion coming out of college never got refined or cleaned up or efficient. And he never got his bottom half to talk to his top half. It was like two things moving in different opposite directions at times. And it was wild that he never, but when you're that good as a scrambler and you can, we've seen this with these players at times. When you got some of that natural ability that's that good, you don't lean as much maybe into refining your skill set down because you can just always fall back on your great gifts.
Eric Michelet, thank you for the $1.99. Do we have a Bobo sighting this week? I mean, I continue to believe that Bobo is probably best off being used sparingly. I think that there will be diminishing returns if you try to get him out there too much and you ask him to do too much. And I feel like the offense was having such a difficult time doing the basic things on Sunday that they couldn't really think about going deeper into the playbook to things like a Bobo play or being able to get to that successful Shenault play. So I don't know. The Bobo stuff might have to wait until the offensive line starts playing competently. I'm not sure.
Bobo, trick play, touchdown reception this week. I'm calling
that's kind of the guy I think you want catching the trick play. Like if Charbonnet's going to throw a touchdown, you think it's got to be to Bobo.
I don't know who throws it, Brendan. I don't know who throws it, but I'm going to go Eric. Bobo receives a trick play touchdown reception this week, a game-changing play. Aside from that, though, I do agree with Brendan in overall terms that you're in a bit of a crawl before you walk phase of things offensively right now, and you've got to get your basics down before you can start getting in your extra little colors and flavors you want to bring into play on this with a guy like Bobo. So I think, getting a little bit of a role here for JSN, finding a way to better feature DK Metcalf, finding footing with the running game with the different backs starting this week. Maybe having a little bit of an actual plan for Fant, who still seems to be a guy that they can't quite figure out how to, I mean, I think he's kind of fighting still through a little bit of an injury himself.
Yeah, he looked very slow to me.
He did to me too. I think that foot thing's still kind of bothering him, but at least the other things, get those things maybe more locked in before you kind of get to the Bobo side of it. But he will play a role this season, and he'll, I'm sure, again, at least a couple games this year as a pass catcher, play his part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Daryl Chapman, thank you for the $4.99. I'm going to the Hawks-Pats game. This is my first Hawk game, and I'm so excited since the Seahawks usually don't play close enough to upstate New York. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Let's go, Daryl. Let's go, man. It'll be a hell of an environment to go into. I'm betting those Pats fans are not going to be very nice. East Coasters going in there with the Seahawks jersey on in that stadium. You're probably going to get your share of hell going in, but hopefully they get the win and you get the last laugh.
Yeah. Should be a pretty good one. I've been told Gillette Stadium is nice. I've certainly never been. I haven't been to any of these road stadiums, but
$400 a ticket there, Brendan.
Yeah. $400 to watch a $30 offensive line.
Jesus, like holy mackerel! Like,
yeah.
When does it? Why not $1,000? You know, like at what point do we arbitrarily decide that'd be too much? Like, holy hell! I remember back in Kingdom days, you go for a $15, $20 ticket. You know, like we are a far cry from that.
Yeah. Apparently, the Giants tickets are like $500 each or something.
This is just come on.
Yeah, you show up to watch Daniel Jones run a 1930s power QB offense.
It's ridiculous. I get it. They can charge what they can get. So it's the way it works. But man, you are pricing out a lot of people from a standpoint of middle class that can't afford that. They can't go, I'm going to put half my rent to go see a Seahawks game or go see and there's something sad in that, I think, a little bit.
Right. Let's see here. Jack Maloney, thank you for the $2.79 Canadian. If that damn punt guy stops fumbling the ball, win. Yeah, I tend to be a patient guy when it comes to this football stuff, but I would not have minded if D. Williams was sent packing this week because he has one job. And we literally won't ask him to do anything else this year, I don't think. And he botched it in every way that it can be botched in that first game.
I'm the same way as you. As I try to be patient. He is a young kid, and so hopefully it can get better with time. But punt returners have increasingly been asked to do less and less because of the fact that punters have gotten better and better. Because punt units and return units and defending have got better and better. So housing it, having great punt returns, stuff's pretty much out of the game. You've got one. It's not just one job, Brendan. That's even putting it to like there's some variety of things you have to do within that one simple job. No, you have one thing to do. You go like this, and you go like this.
Yeah,
that's all you got to do. And there wasn't any breeze blowing out there in Lumen Field this last Sunday. And so, he stops looking at the ball to look at the defender coming rather than just fair catch the ball, call it a day. I don't need you to, and I don't see why any coach wouldn't tell their punt returner this, Brendan. I don't need you to return anything. All you got to do is I do not want the ball to hit the ground. If it's going to hit the ground behind you inside the 20-yard line, it better be inside the 5. Because let's also be clear about this. As bad as the whole fumbling thing goes there, Brendan, the letting the next 2 punts land at the 7-yard line is also just as bad as that mistake almost. Because as a punt returner, you're supposed to catch it if it's outside of the 5-yard line. Mm-hmm. That's where usually the pecking rule goes, is that if it's outside the 5, you fair catch it at like the 7, because there's a really good chance if it's going to hit the 7, that bounce is going to go right to allow the coverage unit to get down there and down the ball like they did. So when he lets those next 2 punts because he's scared of fumbling at land, I can't have a scared punt returner. And the thing is, we've been down this for a couple years now, where these guys, DJ Dallas was a nightmare back there in this way too. They get literally, you can see them frightened, like their hands are shaking to catch the ball. And I don't understand it, because back in the day, those punt returners, Brendan, they'd be fearless. They would catch the ball with the guy breathing on their face. They could be banged after the catch and still catch the ball. These guys can't even just stand in place and just catch the ball. I have a hard time excusing that. Your job has been made simpler than it's ever been in NFL history before. and it's a sunny day with no wind, and you can't just catch the ball. Like, and that's your one job on the team to do. I try to be patient on that one, but at the same point in time, I go, that's kind of, though, a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. Because again, he's not here to play cornerback. He's not here to play wide receiver. He's here to catch punts. And that's what he did in college. It's not like he never did it in college and now we're asking him to do it. That was all he did in college too. You can go back and look at his stats at Tennessee. He barely ever played defense. He barely ever played offense. It was all special teams. Yeah. So for him to do that in the first game, I would not have minded to kick him to the curb this week and just said, okay, Kenny McIntosh, you're up. Or Chenault, you're up, or whatever. Because
I just think the team has no trust in those guys to field it either. And I can say, Brendan, coming from training camp, I had the same thing in training camp watching him. It was hit. They had the two days I was there, they had 5 or 6 guys back returning punts, and nobody was really cleanly every punt receiving it like with ease. It was a struggle for all of them back there.
Well, you know who just retired this last week, right?
Who's that?
Tavon Austin, right? Maybe you could get him to reconsider. Maybe you could give him a call, see what's up.
Him and Gino are tight,
Yeah.
I just, all I want is, if that's what it takes at this point, I don't need a guy that dynamically returns anything. That's the thing. I go get Devin Hester, could probably be called off the couch and do this job. All I need you to do the rest of this year is a punt returner. If it's you, Williams, and you're out there listening, catch the ball. That's all you got to do. You fair catch it every time. Not one fan will call you out on that. Not one fan will be like, oh, he had 5 yards of space there. Punt returning's out of the game. It's no longer a part of it. Maybe the NFL will have to make some rule changes or whatever, but these punters have gotten so good at hitting it with height, with depth, with directional. You just don't see very many. So I'm okay with just saying, just fair catch it every single time. The guy can't hit you, because that's, you don't have to worry about looking, is the guy coming? Just catch it and we're good. Mm-hmm. But don't allow the ball to land at the 7 and then go to the 2 and the 1 yard line, because you're putting our offense in a perilous situation at that point. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's an unforced error.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that game collectively from D. Williams was worse than any game DJ Dallas had returning punts ever. I don't think DJ Dallas has ever had a game that bad.
Not as far as that you had those. I mean, it's clear. DJ had a couple of bad ones in there, because he had the same thing happen to him where he had the fumbled ball in that one game, and then he had the whole rest of the game. He was trying to find the way not to then even catch the punt, and like you see that fear thing coming into play again. But it comes back to the bottom line is that if he's not going to be able to do this consistent, if we come back again and he does this week, you got to go just find a guy that can field the punt, John. There's got to be somebody that exists in this country that can have somebody punt a ball and they can just receive the ball. Like it's kind of crazy that we're at this point to me that we got to say it to this truth. But like, come on,
on TikTok. There's some guy on TikTok doing like trick punt catches or something.
Oh, yeah, he's back there doing it like this and no looking at you. I'm sure he's like, yeah, no, it's actually easy. You just got to work on it. I work on it 24/7. That's what I think with these guys, Brendan. I just think that they didn't work on it.
Yeah,
I just think these guys just wait to get to camp and they're like, okay, we'll start on the jugs machine now.
Yeah, he lives out in West Virginia on a farm, and it's really boring. So he and his dad just punt the football to each other all day, and they've gotten so good at catching it. It's something like that.
Yeah, I guess. I just if it's not going to work, go to something else, because this is his only role. Like you said, he's not here to be a corner. He's not here to be a receiver. He's here to just do this.
Did you ever see that movie? I think it was Tony Danza, the garbage picking, field goal kicking Philadelphia phenomenon. Did you ever see that one?
No,
I think it was Tony Danza. He played a garbage man in Philadelphia who ended up as the place kicker for the Eagles.
Oh, Jesus.
And I don't know, there was this one thing that he did every morning to start up the garbage compactor where he would like kick it. And he got so used to doing that motion, it made him good at kicking the ball. It was not a very good movie, but that stuck with me for some reason.
Oh, Lordy. That's one. I guess there's been 2 movies about everyman players who then go play for the Eagles because then you have the Mark Wahlberg movie too on top of it.
Oh yeah. I never saw that one.
It was okay.
Yeah,
it was okay.
Mumbles, thank you for the $2. Meanwhile, DJ Dallas with the return TD for Arizona. Well, he's a good kick returner.
That's the thing. Yeah. His kick returns, it's a different story with DJ as a kick returner. He's comfortable with that. He's was above average for us as a kick returner.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
really just it's that damn punt returning thing. It's that stupid punt returning.
Yeah. Good for DJ, by the way. Arizona didn't win the game anyway, so who cares? He can have that punt return. He can have the kick return touchdown. Good for him.
Kick return, by the way, is going to come into play. I now believe relief Brendan later on in the season, and I've got the reason why, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but did a cause for the DJ Dallas kick return, helped the DJ Dallas kick return. And what that is going to be the winds of winter. When we get these stadiums with a lot more of the elements blowing, and specifically those kicks are going against that wind, because the kickers have to kick it further to get it into the back of the end zone now. So more time into that wind. And on the play with DJ Dallas in Buffalo, there was a windy day. It was blowing at the kicker's face, and it was a short kick. I think DJ got about the 30-yard line. Now that speed, that gets that kick returner closer to his unit, and those holes that now open up instantaneously as gaps are able to be exploited that much quicker on those shorter kicks like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I still wouldn't necessarily trust him in that situation, but people forget. I think people kind of turn DJ Dallas sucks as a punt returner to DJ Dallas sucks at everything.
Yeah.
Like that happened with a lot of people, and it's not true. There are things that he's good at. He wasn't a bad third down back, honestly, either. Like, he's not a bad player. He just is bad at some things that, unfortunately, for a long time, we had him trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fourth round running back. He took these fines as a kick returner. He was all right as a running back. I mean, he's a grinder as a back. So he's not a bad player, but I don't think he was necessarily a good player either, outside of, maybe kick returning being the best thing he did.
Right. And there are plenty of players in this league like that. Plenty of players who, yeah. All right. Anything else left to say about this Patriots game?
No, I think just keep it tight to the vest, man, and stay in that conservative role. There'll be other days to try to light things up and open things up, I think. And this is a day to just try to, trust that you can lean on them with your talent and with your coaching advantages you got brought to the table now as well. And, if the defense starts to falter differently from what they did with Denver in this first week in the early part of the game, then maybe you adjust off that. But I think to start things out, you feel things out in that way, and you let this thing kind of be something that can go down you're not scared to let this go down a little bit to the line by playing it close like that. Just trust in that talent, trust in your ability, trust in your difference makers that you have versus them.
Yeah, this game should be all about their offensive line versus our defensive front. Nothing else in this game should matter that much. If we allow anything else to matter in this game, we made a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think too, defensively, be willing to go those 3-4 looks like you did last week, because so much of this, Brendan, now with these 3-4 defenses, of course, has been the 4-man fronts, right? That's nickel 4-man fronts instead of the 3-4. Get some more pure 3-4 out there, especially if they're going to give you that 12 personnel look with the 2 tight ends. Don't give them an easy look with a 4-man front with the 12 personnel, which allows them to duo block you on a couple of guys, get those combo blocks up there at that spot. Don't let that happen, to make it hard on them in that way. But you do that, Brendan, I think you come out with the dub in this one.
Right. And I'm feeling pretty good about it too. I think we are going to get that win. Score prediction. I'm going to say something like 20-9.
I like it. I'll go 17-10. I think it is going to be a low scoring game. I think we are going to play conservative, and I think that's a good Patriot defense to keep us relatively controlled, but I don't think offensively they can challenge us enough, and we play a clean enough game from the turnover standpoint that that's enough to get it done.
Yeah. I also have some respect for the fact that it's a 10 a.m. start. They might come out a little bit sleepy. It's a long flight over to New England. It's going to be tight at first, I think. Hopefully not as bad as it was against Denver, but you could see some of the similar sloppiness.
Coach Carroll had mastered the 10 a.m. start. Whether his teams were in a place of faltering schematically, he always had his teams at the end there ready at those 10 a.m. games, ready to play, something that was different than any other coaches that had come prior to Carroll, where from Patera to Knox to Holmgren and on down the line, they all struggled in those 10 a.m. games. So this will be to your point, a bit of an indicator on how Macdonald deals with it coming into this one, because it is difficult. 10 a.m. start times is tough. Your body's just not awake fully at that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think that will do it for the show tonight. Thank you, Brandon, for doing this with me, sitting down for about 2 hours here, breaking it down.
A pleasure as always, man. Love it.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody in the chat. We had around 450 people throughout most of the show tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I will be taking my talents over to Twitch in a little bit here, doing some more Dead Rising 1, getting ready for the remaster. My friend should be on the stream tonight as well, by the way. He is a Dolphins fan. He said he will be drunk. So come on by for that, if nothing else.
Hey, that in itself will be a good. Drunk Dolphins fan. Let's go.
Yeah, it's not a good time right now for them. They're not happy about anything.
They could see this train coming. You handed Tua 200 million. Come on.
Yeah, and lose your whole defense to keep Tua. It's a bad scene.
Oh, look at the Baker for Brooks thing. Like, explain that one to me. You eat the dead money on Baker so that you can then go pay Brooks at 324. They're two different players. I mean, they're just, you even saw it tonight watching. I mean, Brooks got lucky in coverage tonight. Like, his speed, the only thing he saved him. He's just like doing that whole, like, I don't see where the ball is. I'm just going to put my hands out and hope it hits it.
I think they were scared of maybe the injuries with Baker, possibly because he had been dealing with some stuff. And in fairness, he's dealt with a little bit of stuff since he got here too. But
true.
I'm pretty happy with the way that exchange worked out.
I am too. I like the flop too as well.
Okay. So everybody have a good night. Seahawks are 1-0. Seahawks are poised to make it 2-0. Let's get this first road win in the Mike Macdonald era. Let's get this second win of the season overall. Let's put ourselves in a position to get off to a big head start in this suddenly not quite so fearsome, dare I say, NFC. Suddenly, maybe not quite so fearsome NFC West. I don't know. Just putting it out there. We're going to need a little more evidence, but I don't mind what I see. And never forget.
Never forget. Go Hawks.